The story starts in Arboral year 1294, the battlefield is covered with bodies and scattered soldiers. People move through the field collecting severed heads and checking them for rewards. One man holds up a head and asks if it is worth anything. Another man examines it and states that it is only a rancor, so there is no reward for it. Nearby, a soldier notices the plume on another severed head and explains that it belongs to an officer. He suggests the others to take the head to Gerhardt and collect a shiny silver grosso as payment. A young boy sits among the dead and reaches toward a strange metal instrument lying on the ground. The boy picks up the instrument and notices blood pooled inside its tube. He finds it dirty and continues examining it. He empties the blood from the instrument and places it against his lips. After trying it, he regarded it as a new instrument for himself. At this point there is no way anyone could guess what kind of story this is about to become. So, subscribe and stick around for what happens next. The scene shifts to a military camp marked by a flag. Someone remarks that the tactics used in the previous battle are effective. As wounded soldiers receive treatment in the camp, a commander orders the men to begin their march toward the holy territory at daybreak. He instructs them to show their valor in the battles ahead. A soldier informs Gerhardt that the report is complete. As Gerhardt focuses on his task, the soldier asks what he is doing. Gerhardt presses a blade against the messenger's face and carves a mark into his skin. He explains that the mark serves as propaganda for their mercenary company. As he finishes carving, Gerhardt explains that they mark some captured foreheads and then send those men back. He tells the messenger that the work is done and orders him to leave. The marked messenger runs away from the camp. Gerhardt explains that the men they release spread their reputation wherever they go. He continues carving another mark while explaining that a wider reputation brings more work and more coin for the company. The soldier states that he understands. Gerhardt explains that mercenaries depend on a steady flow of work, unlike regular soldiers. He adds that the marks serve another purpose. While carving, the guy recites a prayer and Gerhardt explains that the marks act as a reminder for the men who receive them. He explains that in these times a man can be alive one day and gone the next. He says the mark reminds them that they once lived a little life. Someone calls out to Gerhardt while Gerhardt continues his work. A tall man approaches the camp. He notices Luca nearby and asks if he has finished looting the bodies. Luca steps forward and states that he has come to collect what he is owed. Gerhardt looks at him without replying. He says that Luca still owes him a large debt for being taken in and raised. Luca argues if he is paying him the debt for what Gerhardt spent on raising him. Our boy asks how many more battles he must survive before the debt is cleared. He has already done his part as Gerhardt's bugler and more besides. A nearby soldier remarks that Luca has not finished his part yet. The guy adds that blowing a horn from the safety of the rear guard does not count for much. A merchant tells Luca to get off his high horse. He says Luca can talk all he wants after bringing back a general's head. That merchant continues by saying that anyone can blow a horn. Gerhardt asks that merchant if he has ever picked up a bugle himself. He says he has not and explains that he never had a reason to. The soldier says that the task seems easier than risking his neck on the front lines. Gerhardt calls Luca over and tells him to play a call for them. Our boy looks over and gets confused. He tells Luca to make it loud and says the tune does not matter. Gerhardt points toward a distant tree line and tells Luca to make the sound reach that far. Luca asks why and Gerhardt tells him to do it without explaining any reason. Luca raises the bugle and blows into it with all his strength. The sound bursts across the camp and carries into the distance. Soldiers nearby cover their ears while the blast echoes across the field and reaches the forest. Birds take flight from the trees as the sound spreads through the area. The men watch in silence while Luca lowers the bugle. Gerhardt turns toward the soldiers and asks if any of them can manage to do anything like that. The soldier hesitates in silence before answering Gerhardt that they cannot. Gerhardt pulls back his bloody blade as a prisoner groans in pain, and then he calls out to get Luca's attention. He tells Luca that if he wants to leave the mercenary group he should not waste another minute, but warns him about being out on his own. Gerhardt advises Luca to become a master musician, though he notes that Luca has very low odds of reaching that dream. Luca spits on the ground. Our boy swears as he turns around quickly, his cloak flapping as a nearby soldier watches him walk away. The soldier looks closely at the back of Luca's head and wonders if the object sticking out of his hair is a horn or a branch. The soldier points toward the boy and asks Gerhardt about the object on his head, and Gerhardt acknowledges the horn before calling for the next man to step forward. Gerhardt notes that the growth is disturbing and states that it has been sprouting from the boy's head since he was a baby. He suspects that the unusual growth on Luca's head is the reason his parents abandoned him as a baby, and he notes that even the slave trade would have no interest in someone like him. The soldier wonders aloud if the boy is even human, which only makes Gerhardt laugh. Gerhardt dismisses any idea of the boy being possessed by a demon, stating that he is simply a cheeky child while he continues carving a mark into a groaning prisoner. He adds that the boy tells the wildest lies at times, causing the soldier to ask for clarification about those statements. As Luca walks away into the distance, Gerhardt explains to the soldier that the boy claims to be able to see sound, a concept he dismisses as complete nonsense. The soldier remains silent while Gerhardt stretches his back and tells him to ignore the boy, stating that he has a message to deliver to the army leadership. Gerhardt announces that his company will excuse themselves from the scheduled march tomorrow, prompting the soldier to ask for the reason behind this choice. The man looks upward and explains that he is thinking they are running too low on food and supplies. Gerhardt explains that the mercenary company will forage for food and supplies locally. Later, the mercenaries attack a small settlement, and a soldier reports that there are about 100 villagers in the area. A soldier states that the local storehouses are nearly empty after the winter. Gerhardt states they need to gather 10 days of food to sustain their group of 300 people. Gerhardt orders his men to limit their celebration and focus on packing the essentials since they cannot stay long, and a soldier obeys the command. A soldier asks Gerhardt how many prisoners they need to mark on the forehead, and the man agrees it is a fair point while Luca walks past them. Our boy pulls an empty wooden sled across the ground as he heads toward a tall stone tower. Luca opens a door with his torch and searches the room, wondering if there is any sheet music or old hymns left inside. He follows a scratching noise to a wooden barrel, and when he lifts the lid, he finds a terrified young girl shaking inside. Our boy looks down into the barrel in silence, and the girl looks up to ask him for help. Luca asks the girl if she has a family, and she points out of the barrel toward a nearby area. Our boy stands with his torch inside the room where the dead bodies of the villagers lie on the floor. Luca turns his attention back to the girl and states that he wants to ask her a question. He holds up his torch and asks the girl if the village has any sheet music or musical instruments. Later, the girl runs away into the dark forest while Luca watches her from behind. Our boy sits on a hill as the laughter of the mercenaries echoes from the camp, leaving a basket filled with sheet music and a wind instrument beside him. Luca looks at a sheet of paper and notes that the villagers actually had plenty of music, reflecting on what kind of piece it is. He looks down at a piece of sheet music and notes that he needs to learn how to read it. Luca wipes his horn with a cloth, lifts the instrument to his lips, and begins to blow into it. A pattern of glowing dots connected by lines rises into the dark night sky from the end of the horn. Gerhardt watches from the camp as Luca sits on a distant rock playing his horn with a smile. Gerhardt walks over and asks Luca how he is doing, causing Luca to look back annoyingly. He sits down next to Luca and remarks that our boy is practicing his music alone again while Luca continues to play a steady note. Gerhardt states that a low mercenary can never become a master musician while Luca continues to play his horn. The man says that he saw Luca let the village child escape, which causes Luca to stop playing his horn. Gerhardt rests his chin on his hand and states that the escape does not matter to him since the company does not have the luxury of taking prisoners anyway. He explains that the main problem is that Luca has never come to terms with this mercenary life. Gerhardt reminds our boy that he is their bugler and the one who issues commands to the entire group. He tells the boy to show the other men that he is one of them by sharing the loot and enjoying the plunder. Luca holds the instrument near his lips and states that there is nothing for him to enjoy. He adds that there is nothing fun about the horrible things they do to people. Gerhardt looks away and admits that Luca has a fair point, acknowledging that there is nothing proper about their actions. He tells the boy that it still matters and instructs him to drop his pride so he can learn to enjoy what he has been given. Gerhardt asks our boy if he knows the meaning of being a maestro, and Luca explains that it is simply a job where a person plays music to earn money. The boy states that he does not care about titles as long as he gets to perform. Gerhardt observes that playing the horn brings Luca joy. Gerhardt sets aside the talk about seeing sound and admits that dreaming of becoming a maestro is acceptable, and our boy states that it is definitely not a bad thing. Luca states that he loves playing his bugle, but clarifies that his motivation is not just a love for the music itself. The boy explains that he hates everything in his life except for the music. Luca thinks about the rows of corpses hanging from trees, spears covered in the rotting guts of the dead, and girls his own age who are defiled by grown men. He realizes that when he plays his bugle and sees his music, he is able to completely ignore all of that horror. Luca explains that he wants to take lessons from veteran buglers and learn to read music at a university because most of the world is bad and he prefers to do something that is not. Our boy asks Gerhardt if he can really be blamed for wanting to leave his current life far behind. Gerhardt calls out to Luca and asks if the horn on his head has grown a little bit. Later, a loud horn echoes across a massive army of soldiers holding spears under the sky. Gerhardt rides on a horse while carrying his spear forward with the army. Luca marches alongside the infantryman and notes to himself that his head is very itchy right as Gerhardt calls his name. Gerhardt adjusts his armor and informs Luca that he is assigned to be with the infantry today. Luca asks for the reason behind this change, and Gerhardt explains that they are taking commands from proper officers in this battle and that even he is in the vanguard as cavalry. Gerhardt explains that their employer, the general, does not want the mercenary company to claim any of the glory. He points across the camp and states that he cannot issue commands through Luca, ordering the boy to join the reserve corps instead. Gerhardt notes that Luca is almost 14 years old and states that the boy needs to start spending time training with a spear. The man lets out a large yawn while another mercenary stands next to a horse nearby. The mercenary looks toward the distant horizon and notes that the enemy appears to have about 1,000 men, and Gerhardt agrees that it looks that way. The mercenary adds that the enemy has 700 fewer men than their own side, making victory certain, while Gerhardt nods in agreement. An officer on horseback shouts to the troops that once the first cavalry squadron charges, squadrons 2 and 3 must stand by and wait for the signal. The officer rides away into the field while repeating his orders for the 2nd and 3rd squadrons to wait for the signal. Gerhardt looks at Colin and asks if he has a dream of his own. Colin asks the man what kind of dream he means and suggests that his dream might be to eat a whole turkey by himself. Colin adds that he also wants to visit a classy brothel where proper knights receive service, prompting Gerhardt to ask if that is his only dream. Colin asks if that statement was the wrong answer, and Gerhardt replies that it is not wrong because he would say the exact same thing. As a bird flies over the military formations, Gerhardt reflects that he might be sick and tired of that kind of life. Colin says that there is nothing else to look forward to, causing him to wonder what greater pleasures exist in the world. Gerhardt agrees with the statement as they look toward a flag flying above rows of spears. The scene shows a group of cloaked figures and riders with large metal tubes for heads traveling together under a large flag. The tube head asks Demi if she can see the boy. Demi looks across the field and confirms that she spots him standing among the row of soldiers. Demi observes that the boy appears small for his age and estimates him to be about 14 years old. The tube-headed commander wonders if the boy has already awakened his power and expresses a desire to evaluate his abilities during the battle. As a horn sounds across the field and the massive army begins to move, the commander notes that the battle is starting. The commander calls out to Zoe. He instructs Zoe to go wild in battle as she normally likes to do. The commander explains that the Allied forces will take care of the rest of the enemy once Zoe has reduced their numbers. Zoe stands calmly among the ranks of soldiers before stepping forward with a bare foot and walking out alone onto the open battlefield. She watches from behind as the enemy cavalry charges toward her across the field, their horses creating a heavy thumping sound as they close the distance. An enemy rider charges forward on his horse, causing a soldier to watch in confusion and note that their own forces are not moving forward and no arrows have been shot while Zoe stands alone before the opposing lines. Zoe pulls down her hood to reveal large branch-like horns growing from her head, making an enemy soldier wonder what is wrong with her. A charging horse rears up directly in front of Zoe as the rider screams out, but she remains completely still before the animal. Zoe reaches out and grabs the horse's front leg with her bare hand, causing the horse to tilt and sending the rider flying upside down. She uses her immense strength to swing the entire horse by its leg and fling the animal and its rider high into the air. The thrown horse crashes heavily into the other oncoming riders, knocking them off their mounts and destroying the enemy cavalry formation. The force of the counterattack throws horses and riders high into the air, completely shattering the advancing cavalry line. From a high view above the field, horses and men crash to the ground and scatter in total disarray. Zoe stands motionless from behind as armor pieces and defeated soldiers fall to the earth around her. Gerhardt watches the destruction in silence before realizing they must retreat immediately. Colin asks if Gerhardt saw what happened, and Gerhardt orders him to get word to all of the troops. Gerhardt explains that the enemy has brought a foe that is completely beyond their understanding, while Colin asks for clarification on that statement. He rides away quickly to find Luca so the boy can signal the retreat, telling Colin to save his own life, and Colin complies with the order. An allied officer stops Gerhardt and points out that no retreat has been called, asking where he is going and reminding him that his orders are to defeat the enemy warrior, leaving Gerhardt unable to give a clear response. Far away, a companion soldier stands with Luca and looks out toward the distant battlefield, noting that the fighting has begun at the front lines. He states that while their current position is boring, he is glad to be safe from danger, and he asks the boy if he agrees. The companion turns toward the boy as Luca begins to groan and crouch down in pain. Luca drops his helmet and collapses further as the guy asks what is wrong with him. Our boy explains that his head is causing him severe pain, and the companion instructs the boy to lean on him for support. The guy carries Luca through the ranks of soldiers, shouting for everyone to make way for an injured person. He directs Luca toward a ruined hovel in the distance where they can rest, and our boy thanks him. A horse flies through the air above them as the companion remarks that any excuse to leave the battle line is acceptable, while Luca continues to groan. Luca remembers being told that he was dead weight in his first battle too, right as an object flies overhead and hits the ground with a loud thud. A cracking sound comes from the branch on his head, and Luca lies flat on his back among the broken wood. He rests on the ground inside the ruined building while breathing heavily and groaning. Luca cries out in pain as he grips a sharp piece of broken wood that has pierced his belly. Our boy pants and sweats from the pain before pulling the broken wooden piece out of his chest with a sharp tug. Luca looks out from the hills at the distant battlefield where the main armies clash with loud shouts. He sits near a stone wall breathing heavily as the branch on his head makes another cracking sound. The infantry soldiers clash with the enemy and Luca notes that their side is losing, wondering if Gerhardt made a mistake with his plan. Luca crouches down and decides that he must escape from the battlefield. A heavy stream of blood pours from his open wound, and his legs give out as he drops toward the floor. He hits the ground hard and lies completely flat on his stomach. Blood drips from his side and pools onto the ground with a splash. Luca looks down at the floor and considers the possibility that he should have left the broken wooden piece inside his body. Our boy tells himself that he cannot put the wooden piece back now. His eyes slowly close as his remaining strength fades away. Luca collapses onto his forearms with a heavy thud and silently curses his situation. Lying motionless on the dirt, Luca reflects on his life and notes that he never even learned how to read music. From an overhead view, Luca appears small among the broken wood and scattered debris. He looks at the floor and acknowledges that this is the end of his life. A tear rolls down the face of Luca. He looks ahead and sees a dead soldier lying on the ground in front of him. The corpse has the mercenary company mark deeply carved into its forehead. Luca remembers Gerhardt saying that he marks the captured men to give them a reminder that they once lived a little bit of life. He looks down in complete silence as blood runs down his face. Our boy struggles to breathe and clenches his fist before dropping heavily to his knees. He realizes that he is dying, spits a mouthful of blood onto the ground, and pauses to consider his situation. Luca suddenly stands up and raises his bugle to his lips. He reasons that if the entire mercenary company dies in this battle, there will be nobody left to remember him, even if they are just basic thugs. The branch on Luca's head makes a distinct cracking sound as it grows toward the sky. He concludes that it is still better for his companions to be alive than to be dead and gone. Arrows fly through the air around a military flag as Gerhardt notes that the enemy troops are mostly gathered together and wonders if they should take action. An officer states that they will not move yet. Gerhardt raises his wooden shield on horseback to block the falling arrows while considering if the battle is already over. He instructs the nearby riders to wait and see what happens next. A large barrage of arrows rains down from the sky as the massive infantry formation shouts and runs across the open field. The front lines are completely pincered from both the front and behind with no available way out. In addition, both wings of the army face a direct barrage of incoming crossbow bolts. A soldier remarks to the others that arguing with the troops who wanted to flee was a bad move. The military units become completely mixed together, leaving no one to take proper command of the forces. Gerhardt looks around from his horse and asks about the location of the woman who threw the horse. A nearby soldier answers that she appears to have fallen back after causing all of that destruction. Gerhardt considers the identity of the horned woman and notes that she might be a relative of Luca. He points his gloved hand upward and states that there is no time to think about the matter now. He commands his men to break through with the cavalry, keep the horses alive until the signal sounds, and inform the infantry that they are carving a path through the enemy. Gerhardt reflects on their situation and notes that if they had Luca with them, they could have made a move much sooner. A loud horn sound begins to echo through the area. A massive network of glowing lines and dots bursts across the sky above the battlefield. Gerhardt and the surrounding infantry stop to look up at the large light pattern. The glowing connected dots spread widely across the clouds. From an overhead view, the soldiers stand completely still in surprise, and the light pattern reflects clearly inside Gerhardt's open eye. The soldiers look directly up at the sky, and a man states that the glowing lights look like stars. Soldiers look up at the sky in silence. One soldier states that the noise sounds like a signal to retreat. Gerhardt recalls the statement about seeing sound. He speaks Luca's name as he reflects on the situation. A straight pillar of sound rises from the distant landscape. The tube-headed commander and his companions stand on a hill and watch the beam reach into the sky. The commander states that they have just witnessed the awakening of the boy's power. His companion agrees with the statement. The tubehead places his hand against his metal head. He notes that they now have a lot to look forward to in the future. The commander reflects on how thrilling it is when a new companion joins their ranks. Meanwhile, a bright light glows directly on Luca's forehead. Our boy kneels on the ground while holding his bugle. He looks upward at the connected lines. Luca laughs quietly to himself as the connected lines fade from the sky. He presses the instrument back against his lips to sound the bugle once more. A loud blast of sound rises from the ground as Luca sits in the open field. The glowing pattern stretches across the sky above the gathered military forces. Both soldiers stare at the light. Gerhardt remains on his horse and looks forward at the massive beam of light rising. He looks ahead and wonders what is happening on the field. Gerhardt observes the light and realizes it marks the exact edge of the enemy encirclement. He notes that the signal points directly to the area where he planned to break through. The man looks upward and realizes that the rain of arrows has stopped falling from the sky. Gerhardt shouts a loud command for the cavalry to make ready for their advance. The nearby soldiers look around and mutter to each other in confusion. He tells his men to look at the beam of light and commands them to smash through the enemy lines at that exact spot. A soldier speaks to the captain and states that the sound is actually the call to retreat. Gerhardt states that the sound is from Luca and explains that the boy is showing them a way out. He shouts for the infantry to make way as he rides his horse through the ranks of soldiers. Gerhardt bellows a command to charge as his horse springs forward into a gallop. The mercenary cavalry lets out a loud battle cry as they ride forward together. Gerhardt guides his horse down the middle of the field directly toward the pillar of light. The cavalry crashes into the rows of foot soldiers to break through the enemy lines. The horse hooves crash heavily into the enemy infantry, trampling their bodies and crushing them onto the ground. Gerhardt looks back from his mount and notes that he has successfully broken through the enemy lines. Luca takes a quick breath and blows into his bugle once more, sending another column of light into the sky near Gerhardt. Gerhardt hears the new call and observes that the position of the light has shifted. A soldier points his sword toward the field and informs Gerhardt that the signal is over there now. Gerhardt turns his attention toward the new direction and acknowledges that the signal has indeed moved. He gallops forward and commands his men to follow the light and the music. Gerhardt tells his men to break the enemy ranks and clear an escape path for their allies. He rides forward on his horse and realizes that he is not the only one experiencing the signal. Gerhardt observes that all of the allied soldiers on the battlefield understand Luca's signals as they move forward with their spears. An archer releases an arrow and Gerhardt notes that the soldiers are not just seeing the sound. He reflects that the actual meaning behind the sound is directly entering their minds while a large amount of arrow flies toward them. Arrows strike the soldiers on the field while Gerhardt notes that the boy is guiding them through the battle. The infantrymen run toward the glowing border as a soldier shouts for everyone to reach the line on the double. An officer orders his men to go after the enemy and leave no one alive while the infantry units charge across the field. The soldiers cross the glowing marks on the ground as a fighter spins around with his shield to face an attacker. Allied soldiers clash with the enemy along the glowing boundary, striking out with their weapons to push the opposing lines back. An enemy soldier receives a fatal blow to the neck and realizes that the entire Allied army turned around at once because they were commanded by the horn call. A nearby soldier shouts for everyone to run to the next line to save their lives. The retreating troops sprint across the open field toward the distant pillar of light, shouting orders to form ranks and fall back together. Luca sits quietly on the grass and looks up at the sky, wondering how his music caused the lights to appear. While more soldiers run past him, our boy reflects that he has always been able to see sound but never thought about sharing that vision with other people. Luca looks at his instrument and remembers that playing music and seeing it by himself used to be enough for him as dozens of infantrymen hurry to join the retreat. From an overhead view, the scattered troops gather together and align into a single organized line across the battlefield. The large, organized group of soldiers stands in a tight block formation on the battlefield while others scatter across the ground. Above them, a massive glowing pattern of straight lines and dots begins to spread across the field. Luca blows into his bugle with wide eyes and blood smeared across his forehead. He realizes that he is now almost enjoying the situation while rows of Allied spearmen stand beneath the giant glowing grid that fills the sky. Gerhardt looks back at the glowing pattern in the sky while riding his horse across the field. He pulls tightly on the reins to change his direction. The man gallops forward on his horse and shouts loudly to Colin that Colin is in command now. Colin turns around on his horse in surprise and asks the captain where he is going. Gerhardt turns his head back with a grimace and yells that the enemy is coming, telling Colin to save himself. He grips his weapon and notes that our boy has always been a handful to deal with. He speaks Luca's name as he charges forward on horseback and strikes down an enemy soldier. Gerhardt is surrounded by enemy foot soldiers pointing their spears directly at his horse. He looks up at the glowing lines in the sky and realizes that this pattern is exactly what Luca saw. From a high hill, Luca sits and looks out over the wide battlefield below where the armies are moving. Nearby, a flag waves over the marching troops while Luca remains seated on the dirt. Our boy looks up with a bloody face and asks if they saw his action. Beside him, tiny new leaves sprout from the branch on his head with a quiet sound. Luca loses his remaining strength and slumps forward toward the ground. Before he hits the dirt, one man from that mysterious group reaches out and catches his arm to support him. The tall man holds the exhausted boy securely and greets him, telling Luca that he did a good job. Luca remains silent as his eyes grow heavy with exhaustion. A hooded woman with a curved horn on her head tells Luca to sit still for a moment while the boy watches her closely. The woman kneels down and places her hand over Luca's open wound. Her hand begins to glow with a bright light. She breathes heavily and breaks into a sweat as she absorbs the injury. She informs Luca that she has successfully taken on half of his wound. The hooded woman tells Luca that her healing action will keep him breathing, but she warns him to be careful because it cannot replace the blood he has lost. Suddenly, Gerhardt calls out to get their attention. Gerhardt walks toward the group from a distance and states that he wants to know what is happening. He appears heavily battered and covered in blood. Luca looks up and speaks Gerhardt's name as his commander approaches the gathered group. The tube-headed commander, the tall traveler, the hooded woman, and another companion carrying an unconscious person all stand together outside a ruined wooden hovel. Our boy rests on the ground and looks toward the side. The tube-headed commander crouches down directly in front of the boy while the other companions look on in silence. The commander states that they have come for Luca. The boy looks up blankly, unable to understand the statement. The commander explains to Luca that this information may be a lot to take in, but the boy is not an ordinary human. He explains that Luca is branch hexed and belongs to a group of people called the Branched. He adds that the branches are remarkable individuals who possess wondrous powers. The commander states that the light Luca projected on the battlefield is the power of his branch hex. He explains that a person buds and awakens to these special abilities at 14 years of age. He crouches on the ground and invites the boy to join his company as their new bugler. Gerhardt interrupts from the side to get their attention. He walks over from a distance while holding his injured midsection. He tells the commander that he is sorry to disrupt the offer because the boy belongs with him and his mercenary band. Gerhardt states that if the commander wants to take the boy, there is a specific condition that must be met. Blood drips down past Gerhardt's eye as he presses his hand against his wound. The tube-headed commander looks back and tells Gerhardt to state his condition clearly. The man looks at the commander and tells him to make sure they teach the boy music. Luca looks up at Gerhardt in response to his words. The tube-headed commander remains silent for a moment before asking if that is the entire request. The commander asks for the reason behind that specific demand. Gerhardt looks down and states that he does not know and cannot explain it himself. Gerhardt explains that he has only ever seen the terrible things that fill this rotten world. He adds that he believes the boy somehow sees something more than that. The man notes that the commander looks like an important holy leader. He states his belief that the leader can make this future happen for the boy. The commander turns to Luca and asks if this arrangement is acceptable to him. Our boy looks down and confirms that it is exactly what he wants. The commander rests his hand against his leg and states that the matter is now settled. He looks out toward the open landscape and announces that they will now depart. The commander walks away from the hovel while his companions support the exhausted boy as they exit through the doorway together. Luca looks down in silence as they leave the ruined building behind. Our boy calls out to Gerhardt from across the open landscape under the cloudy sky. He looks back and asks Gerhardt how he liked his playing, while Gerhardt listens in silence. Gerhardt answers that he does not care much for the arts, but he states that the boy sounded better than ever. Luca acknowledges the statement and says goodbye as he turns away, and Gerhardt bids him farewell in return. The companion carries Luca away through the ruined building while the boy looks down and lets out a quiet chuckle. Luca remembers Gerhardt stating that he sounded better than ever, causing the boy to cover his face as his quiet laughter turns into tears. Tears stream down Luca's face as he continues to cry and laugh while being carried away. Gerhardt sits completely still on the dirt floor inside the ruined hovel when an outside voice calls out to him from behind. An enemy soldier announces that they found another survivor, and another asks if they should take him prisoner. A soldier notes that they will not get a ransom for Gerhardt, so they decide there is no need to keep him alive and state that they will just take his head. An enemy soldier swings his blade down toward Gerhardt while stating that he does not know how much money the captain's head will bring them. Blood sprays high into the air against the sky as the weapon strikes. The season changes to spring in Thermi, the holy capital, as a bird flies over the tightly packed buildings of the city. Luca lies flat on a bed inside a building, staring blankly up at the high stone ceiling. The tube-headed commander notices the boy opening his eyes and notes that he is finally awake. Luca sits up in his bed inside a massive hall with tall arched windows while the commander sits quietly on a stool beside him. Our boy looks around his new surroundings and asks the commander about their current location. The commander explains that they are inside the barracks infirmary located in the holy capital city of Thermi, adding that Luca became unconscious during their journey there. The commander places a hand on his chest and apologizes for neglecting to introduce himself first. He explains that he is the head and pontiff of the Spire Church. He adds that he stands above everyone else within this holy territory, instructing the boy to call him Your Holiness. The pontiff extends his gloved hand and tells the boy that it is now his turn to introduce himself. The boy pauses in silence before preparing to speak. The boy states that he was raised by the mercenary company and worked as a bugler. He looks forward with a tired expression as he begins to speak his name. The boy stares ahead as he considers the name that Gerhardt originally gave to him. He sits up fully in his bed, looks over at the leader, and tells him to call him Luca. Luca focuses his attention back on the pontiff and states that his true goal is to become a maestro. The pontiff acknowledges the statement and tells Luca that he will gladly guide him toward achieving that dream. He raises a single finger to present a condition, explaining that in return Luca must help him defend the realm. The pontiff looks through the window frames and explains that he is referring to his holy territory. Luca listens closely as the leader adds that this location is also the source of power for all branch hexed individuals. Our boy looks out the large window at a massive stone tower outside while the pontiff instructs him that he will be responsible for guarding that very spire. The scene shifts to the top of a giant wooden structure stretching into the sky during Arboral year 1294, noting that it was a specific age. The massive spire towers high above a vast city of rooftops during a historical period when people fought wars over these structures. The second chapter begins as a large stone spire stands tall under a cloudy sky. The tubehead explains that the spires are an inheritance left behind for them by an ancient and advanced civilization. A horse-drawn carriage moves down a busy cobblestone street lined with citizens and tall buildings. He continues his narration, stating that countless cultural and technological relics are located inside the structures, and it is through the analysis of these items that humanity has managed to progress this far. As the carriage travels past the city structures, the man looks out from the window and notes that the spire serves as both the wellspring of civilization and the primary symbol of their faith. Inside the vehicle, the guy sits with his arms crossed and repeats that their religion, Spirism, is concerned with overseeing the spire. He adds that he leads this faith in his role as the pontiff and asks if Luca is able to follow his explanation. The tubehead acknowledges that this information is common knowledge, but Luca rests his head on his hand and responds that he does not know anything about those matters because he was raised by a rough crowd that did not care about education. The pontiff reassures Luca that it is no trouble and states that the boy will learn as he goes forward. The leader's long helmet knocks against the frame of the carriage with a dull sound, and Luca watches him in silence. As the carriage drives away down the empty town street, Luca points out that the leader's helmet looks quite stuffy, but the pontiff answers that the headwear does not bother him at all. The vehicle comes to a stop in a wooded area. Luca stands on the dirt path and looks toward a dark stone archway built into an overgrown hillside while the pontiff exits the carriage behind him. He guides the way, instructing Luca to follow him through a dark stone archway built into the grassy hillside. They walk up a flight of stone stairs inside the dark tunnel while our boy looks back over his shoulder as he follows the leader. Luca asks where they are going, and the pontiff explains that they are heading to his new home from this day forward as they approach a bright opening at the top of the stairs. The man states that Luca will now live his life at Greatwood Manor, a massive stone estate with a giant tree growing behind it. They emerge from the underground tunnel onto the open lawn, where Luca looks around in surprise as the pontiff adds that the boy will reside there along with his kin. A loud creaking sound echoes through the grand interior hall of the manor, revealing a large winding staircase beneath a massive hanging chandelier. The pontiff explains to Luca that knowledge regarding branched individuals and their unique hexes is kept completely secret from ordinary people while they continue to step forward across the floor. Luca looks up toward the high ceiling as the man notes that the inexplicable powers of the branched would only inspire dread in the hearts of regular citizens. As they walk up the stairs, the pontiff explains that the military forces are generally aware of their existence and notes that rumors are frequently whispered among the regular citizenry. The door opens with a creaking sound as the man leads Luca into a large bedroom, stating that this will be his room. He walks across the floor to stand in front of a tall window to bring something, while Luca watches him from behind. The pontiff calls out to Luca to get his attention, prompting the boy to look toward the thing he is holding. He presents a shiny brass musical instrument held in his hands, and Luca recognizes what it is. The leader explains that the object is called a trumpet and describes it as a remarkably advanced brass instrument. He points out the arrangement of pistons that allows for notes outside standard harmonic overtones, noting that building such an item is beyond the capability of current craftsmanship. Our boy looks on with wide eyes as the pontiff explains that the instrument is another unique creation of the spire. Luca raises his hand to touch but the guy doesn't let him do it. He states that Luca's role is to fight to protect the spire. The pontiff confirms that in return he will fully support Luca's studies to become a maestro, and Luca gives his direct agreement to the arrangement. The man tilts his head forward before standing by the arched window of the room. He tells Luca that there is a requirement to fulfill before he can officially take the boy on. He leads Luca out onto the high stone ramparts of a fortress overlooking the ocean where birds fly through the sky. The leader states that the boy must once again demonstrate his power for them. Luca follows the leader along the walkway and asks where he has been brought. He adjusts his hood as he turns around to notice two individuals approaching from behind. The pontiff identifies the two hooded figures as Luca's new comrades and explains that both of them are also branched individuals. He introduces the two companions as Demi and Zoe. Zoe looks back at Luca and apologizes for hitting him with a horse during the previous battle, which leaves the boy completely confused. As they continue walking along the stone wall, the pontiff explains that Thermi functions as a massive fortress city. He adds that this particular section is designed to defend the territory against maritime attacks. He asks if Luca can see the vessels blockading the harbor, and the boy looks out at the water to confirm that he sees a large number of ships. A wide view shows numerous ships floating across the open water as the pontiff explains that they are all warships sent by a neighboring nation. Our boy states that the presence of the fleet sounds bad. The man clarifies that the foreign vessels have been actively enforcing a trade embargo against the city for the past month. The pontiff continues his explanation, stating that the Spires serves as a repository for invaluable relics. He details how the architecture, language, weapon designs, and currency methods provided by the Spire are directly linked to their nation's total power. As the group walks up the fortress stairs, the leader notes that the Spire has other functions, but emphasizes that Luca's current duty is to protect it. They reach the top of the walkway where a few military officers are stationed along the battlements. Our boy observes a man wearing a feathered hat and realizes he must be the local commander, attracting the man's attention. The commander kneels on the stone ground to greet the leader as Your Holiness, and the pontiff welcomes him by the name of Pietro. Pietro remains in a respectful bow while Luca stands beside the pontiff, looking at the officer with surprise. He formally introduces Pietro, explaining that he is the imperator of the military forces for the Holy Realm. Our boy recognizes the weight of the commander's title, but a sudden shout from below commands the soldiers to form ranks, prompting the boy to look over the fortress wall. From the high stone battlements of the fortress, the pontiff and his companions look down at a massive courtyard where hundreds of soldiers have gathered to form neat, organized ranks. He turns his helmeted head toward Luca and addresses him by name. Luca observes the surrounding guards and notes to himself that the leader is truly the most powerful figure in the area, while the pontiff states that Luca's assignment is to take full command of the soldiers below. Outside the fortress, a foreign military flag flaps in the wind along a sandy beach where warships have landed and an extensive camp has been set up. A foreign soldier asks his captain why they are simply sitting around on the beach, prompting the bearded commander to take a sip from his cup and note that the answer should be obvious. The captain explains that they are currently waiting for the arrival of their siege weapons so that they can launch a full assault on the walls of the Holy Realm. The soldier notes that their camp looks entirely too relaxed given their dangerous position right in front of the gates, but the captain tells him not to worry because the enemy believes their forces are only there to maintain the harbor blockade. The captain adds that their plan is to rest on the shore until the defenders reduce their guard, which is when they will strike the gates, and the soldier agrees with the strategy. The commander tells his men to enjoy the sand because it is better than being stuck in the bilge of the flagship, just as a loud horn blast suddenly echoes across the shore. A glowing pattern of connected lines and dots reaches high into the sky above the fortress wall. The foreign captain and his soldiers stare forward with wide eyes. A straight pillar of sound strikes the earth directly in front of the fortress entrance. The defensive units advance together, their boots creating a steady rhythm on the stone path. Rows of infantry soldiers move out from the fortress structure in a tight block formation, holding their large shields and long spears ready. Luca stands on the high wall and blows into his bugle while the branch on his head makes a cracking sound. He remembers the pontiff stating that the first task for him is to eliminate the enemy forces gathered on the beach. Inside a stone meeting room, the leader sits at a table with his officers and notes his dislike for the enemy camp sitting right before their gates, stating that the invaders are likely waiting for the arrival of their siege weapons. He states that he wants the foreign troops completely removed down to the last man, asking Pietro if they are in agreement. Pietro lowers his head and states that he will carry out the order exactly as His Holiness says. The pontiff points toward the troops and informs Luca that he will be given one company to complete this mission in whatever way he deems correct. Our boy looks down anxiously and states that while he understands the objective, he has never held a command like this before, but the pontiff counters that Luca successfully led a retreat just 2 days prior. Luca explains that the retreat was accidental and notes his ignorance of their specific military signals, but the leader replies that the calls are the same ones Luca knows, which Pietro quickly confirms. Our boy looks back at the leader and says that placing actual lives in his hands is a massive responsibility, but the pontiff tells him to stop worrying and view the assignment as a simple test. Luca considers the idea of a test and glances back at one of the soldiers, who looks forward with wide, anxious eyes. The soldier gapes in surprise as Luca suddenly announces his decision to go through with the mission. Luca looks directly at the leader and specifies that he will do it in exchange for the brass instrument he was shown earlier. Our boy adds a final condition that he must not face any trouble if the mission fails, and the pontiff readily agrees to the terms. The nervous soldier silently curses his luck while the lesson states that failing as often as needed is acceptable because it is how a person grows and learns. Back to the present, the soldiers stand assembled in a tight block formation on the ground below, positioned between the high rocky cliffs directly outside the massive fortress gate. The commanding officer looks up anxiously and reflects on the situation, considering how a young boy has been given the absolute freedom to risk his life and the lives of his men. The officer continues his internal thoughts, noting that while dying in a war is one thing, he does not want to perish simply to act as a test for a child, while far above on the tower Luca prepares to play. Suddenly, the soldiers look up in surprise as a giant glowing grid of intersecting lines and dots suddenly spreads across the sky, creating an unexpected pattern of lights overhead. The officer asks his subordinate to confirm that everyone can see the glowing lines, and the soldier answers that he can, stating that he initially thought only the two of them were going crazy. He observes the foreign camp and states that the enemy forces can clearly see the pattern too as noisy chatter breaks out among their ranks. Luca lets out a quick breath and brings the advanced brass instrument directly to his lips to sound the call. A straight pillar of light descends from the sky with a loud blast, striking the earth as a clear marker directly in front of the enemy lines. The officer recognizes the beam as the young bugler's signal and loudly commands his entire company to advance. The infantry soldiers march forward in a synchronized line, as they carry their large wooden shields and long spears. While marching forward, the officer recalls that His Holiness said the boy could show them sound. The commanding soldier shouts for his men to advance at the double, while privately noting to himself that he has no idea what showing sound actually means. A loud rumbling sound echoes as the large company of soldiers runs out from the open fortress gate toward the battlefield, following the straight beam of light. A nearby enemy soldier clutches his helmet and wonders what the advancing troops are thinking. The foreign captain barks orders for his men to get ready and form their ranks. From an overhead view, the organized company of defensive soldiers moves across the open terrain in a tight wedge formation toward the waiting enemy line. An allied soldier notes that the situation feels strange because their legs seem to be moving naturally in perfect synchronization with the sound of the horn call. As the horn blast continues, an allied soldier shouts for the company to raise their shields just as an enemy archer fires a projectile from behind a wooden wall. Multiple arrows strike the wooden shields as the soldiers advance, and the commanding officer realizes that watching the movement of the light shows them the exact next move to make. The Allied army charges across the field from the fortress walls. The foreign captain sees them coming and loudly commands his men to prepare for the attack. The foreign soldiers stand in a row with their wooden shields. The Allied commander realizes that the young bugler's thoughts are entering directly into the minds of the troops. He watches the sky and notes that the sound and the light from the sky are actively guiding their movements. The officer shouts an order for the company to split, and the rows of foot soldiers immediately separate into two opposite sides. The Allied cavalry charges forward out of the fortress gates, riding directly through the open space created by the divided infantry. The foreign soldiers realize that a cavalry unit is attacking them as the horses break straight through their front lines. An overhead view shows the tactical light pattern tracking the split infantry moving to the flanks while the cavalry smashes into the center of the enemy formation. Luca stands on the edge of the battlements and continues to blow into his instrument while watching the clash below. Behind Luca, everyone is gathered and watching him closely. The pontiff stands on the stone wall beside Pietro and observes the battlefield. He explains that the lights above the field transmit information both audibly and visually. He touches his helmet and states that this ability allows for the rapid delivery of complex orders. He notes that the troops formed their columns in a highly coordinated manner. The pontiff calls the situation intriguing, and Pietro agrees with His Holiness. The leader raises a finger and states that he has observed another fascinating aspect of the power. The pontiff explains that anyone who hears the boy's signals experiences a boost in morale. He states that a prisoner captured in the previous battle made a specific claim. The captive noted that moving in time with the horn sound somehow felt good. He further explains that the prisoner felt as though he moved according to his own free will despite following the signals. He adds that people on the sidelines can only see the light, as the boy's true will is sent only to those receiving his commands. The pontiff gestures with his hand and describes the phenomenon as positively intriguing. Pietro looks out toward Luca and speaks his agreement to His Holiness. Below the light beam, Luca holds the horn to his lips and continues to sound the command. In Luca's memory, Gerhardt rests against a pile of hay inside a stable while a young Luca sits nearby with a horn. The man calls out to get the boy's attention. As Luca continues to blow into his instrument, Gerhardt states that battles are never won by those who are soft-headed. He takes a drink from his wooden cup and explains that having quick wits in the middle of a fight and knowing the basic rules are the things that truly matter. The man points out that a successful army needs more than just strong fighters who only possess courage. Gerhardt asks if Luca is listening to his words, which prompts the boy to tell the man to be quiet internally. He provides a specific battlefield example while in the present, both sides of the men clash. Cavalry units are naturally vulnerable to projectiles. A reckless charge will allow enemy crossbowmen to easily destroy the horses. Despite the great power of crossbows, the weapons cannot be fired at a rapid pace. If the riders can get close enough, the cavalry charge will strike the enemy lines before the soldiers can fire their next volley. Gerhardt continues his explanation, moving on to the topic of the infantry, while Luca listens in silence. Infantry forces are not meant for attacking, but are instead designed to act as a mobile wall. He details how the infantry exists to block the enemy and protect the other troops, noting that the opposing army possesses a defensive wall of their own while soldiers on the field command their lines to push forward. The man states that every defensive wall has flanks and a rear, explaining that a commander must break the formation by striking where it is weak, while a soldier on the battlefield looks up at the tactical light pattern overhead. Gerhardt transitions to discussing longbows, which prompts Luca to think back on how the man constantly drilled those military tactics into his head without ever making his purpose clear. In a final memory, Gerhardt requests that someone be sure to teach Luca music, while in the present, Luca keeps his instrument ready. As the horn call continues to blast over the battlefield, a foreign soldier warns his captain that they need to retreat before the enemy cuts off their escape. The captain sees that the fortress gate has opened, thinking that it might be to let the wounded inside, which leaves him staring in surprise. The foreign captain commands his men to raise their flag and charge the gate. He orders them to storm the fortress to take the enemy leader's head. He also notes that the defenders left the entrance unguarded while pressing from behind. The captain commands his entire force to charge forward, telling them to ignore the enemy troops on the beach. The foreign soldiers run toward the fortress as the captain raises his shield to block incoming projectiles. Meanwhile, Lucas remembers Gerhardt saying that there is one more detail to consider. Resting against the pile of hay with his wooden cup, he explains that to completely remove an enemy force, a commander must take no prisoners and leave no survivors. Luca looks onward as he recalls these words. Our boy stands between the stone battlements of the fortress wall and blows a long blast from his horn. The foreign soldiers run toward the open fortress gate. The captain and his men look ahead as they see a light fall in front of the gate. Inside the gateway, rows of infantry soldiers stand ready behind a wall of shields and spears on both sides of the central light beam. The old man's lesson explains that a commander must make the enemy think they are exposed to draw them into the desired position. The ambushed troops keep their helmets lowered and spears raised in the shadows. Gerhardt's instruction details the necessity of quietly moving ambush forces into place. An overhead view reveals the foreign army gathered in the open area before the gate. The defensive troops block the front while two separate allied units move in from the sides to catch the enemy in a pincer movement. Our boy lets out a breath and lowers the brass instrument from his lips. He stands on the stone ramparts and states that the performance is over and the work is done. The pontiff claps his hands together on the high stone walkway while Pietro stands nearby, as Luca finally lowers his brass instrument. Down below the fortress entrance, the defensive soldiers look up at the massive stone structure as the straight beam of light fades from the sky. One of the soldiers states that the situation is strange and requests permission to speak from his captain, who tells the man to go on. The soldier remarks that he actually enjoyed the battle, and his captain responds that he was thinking the exact same thing. The pontiff claps his hands and announces that it is time to proceed. He calls out to Zoe, who pulls up a dark hood and gives the order to clean up the rest of the enemy forces. Luca looks on with confusion as Zoe walks away to stand at the edge of the stone wall, while the branch on the boy's head makes a sharp cracking sound. Our boy approaches Zoe at the edge of the battlements to ask what Zoe is doing, stating that it is a long way down to the ground. Zoe suddenly dives headfirst off the high castle wall. Luca looks over the side in surprise as a dark vortex opens in midair. A severed head of the foreign captain flies through the air while the pontiff explains to Luca that the boy has not yet seen Zoe in combat. The leader tells Luca to observe the area below. At the ground, Zoe leaps through the enemy ranks to eliminate the remaining soldiers. The pontiff looks down from the fortress battlements and states that Zoe is the strongest among his branched individuals while Luca watches in silence. The leader adds that Luca should make a concerted effort to befriend her because her protection is invaluable. Looking at the enemy soldiers thrown into the sky below, Luca realizes why she previously apologized for hitting him with a horse. The scene changes back to Greatwood Manor under a dark sky as the pontiff announces that he hereby anoints the boy. Inside a large room beneath a grand chandelier, the pontiff finishes his statement by welcoming Luca as one of his branched individuals while Demi stands in the background. Luca sits in a large chair and grips his new brass instrument, turning it over in his hands. The leader rests in his seat and tells Luca that he will henceforth act as his eyes, ears, and limbs in his quest to safeguard the realm and the spire. He states that he has yet to inform the boy about their enemy, which causes Luca to express his unfamiliarity with this threat. The pontiff turns toward Demi and commands her to show Luca. He explains that no one has better eyesight than Demi and adds that she can share what she sees with others. Demi tells Luca to cover one eye, and the boy copies her action to ensure he is doing it correctly while a branch on her head makes a cracking sound. Through Demi's shared vision, a massive city surrounded by mountains appears under dark clouds, with a colossal black spire towering over the landscape. Luca adjusts his hand over his eye as the foreign image fully takes hold. Our boy states that he can see another nation through his left eye, though he does not know which one it is. The pontiff confirms that the boy is seeing exactly what Demi sees. The leader explains that because of Demi's exceptional vision, Luca is looking at an island nation located very far away, while rows of armored soldiers march through a gate. The pontiff identifies the enemy they must defeat as the Aran Empire, as a large army marches from the gates of a stone fortress beneath the towering spire. Luca notes that he just saw another spire, and the pontiff confirms the statement, adding that exactly 9 spires exist in the world. A grid board on the table displays 9 small pillars placed across its surface to show the locations of each structure. The pontiff explains that the spire in their holy realm and the one in the Aran Empire are the largest of all, noting that as a pair they are known as the Great Spires. Our boy observes that they are waging a war over these structures, and the leader agrees with the statement but adds that they have another purpose as well. The pontiff looks toward a wreath hanging on the wall. He states that he wants to see the branched individual known as the Garland dead. Luca holds his hand over his eye and repeats the name of the Garland. The pontiff thanks Demi and tells her she may leave, prompting her to walk away. Luca lowers his hand and notes that the vision is gone. The leader sits in his chair with a game piece. He explains that this Garland is a branched individual with massive power. He knocks down a piece on the board. He notes that the soldier joined the Empire 4 months ago and has threatened other nations, warning that ignoring this player could allow the Empire to rule the world. Luca states that he was brought there to perform a task, and the pontiff confirms that the mission is to kill the Garland. The leader adds that he wants to gather all branched individuals to join the battle. Luca looks down at his new trumpet and thinks about the arrangement. Both characters sit in large chairs facing the fireplace. Luca asks if he can leave his job after he eliminates the Garland. The pontiff pauses before asking why the boy wants to leave his service. Luca looks toward the fireplace and reflects on the events of the day. He tells the leader that while he was playing the bugle earlier on the battlements, a specific thought came to his mind. Holding the advanced brass instrument close to his chest, our boy looks down. He states his realization that fighting in a war is not what he is meant to be doing. Luca looks at the flames and considers his current situation. He reflects that although he successfully escaped from a group of murderous thugs to find a place where he can study music, nothing has truly changed for him. Turning back toward the leader, our boy states that those are his exact terms for the arrangement. Luca explains that his days as a bugler will be completely over once he eliminates the Garland. He adds a condition that the leader must continue to fully support his musical studies even after that mission is finished. Our boy offers the leader a final choice, stating that if the man refuses the terms, he will walk out of the room immediately and return the brass instrument. The pontiff remains completely silent for a moment. He slowly raises his hand to scratch the side of his long metal helmet while considering the boy's demands. He extends his open hand forward and states that the boy drives a hard bargain. Hearing this acceptance, Luca turns around with a smile. In front of the stone fireplace, the pontiff and Luca firmly shake hands to officially seal their new agreement. Luca presses the valves on his trumpet and asks the pontiff about the nature and true strength of the Garland warrior. The pontiff answers that 4 months prior, the warrior's power completely destroyed a neighboring nation. Our boy remains quiet and seeks clarification on the event, pondering if the enemy killed the leader or captured the capital city. The pontiff states that the boy is mistaken and explains that the land itself was entirely flattened. The leader details that a single attack from the Garland turned the entire country into a smoking wasteland, as a view reveals a giant crater in the ground surrounded by broken trees. The third chapter begins with the title marching. A man looks out over a ruined landscape filled with rising smoke, thinking that the entire world is bad both here and everywhere else. The view reveals a massive crater where the figure sits alone, concluding that everything is completely ruined and that he is a failure. Birds chirp outside the window as Luca wakes up next to his new brass instrument and slowly sits up in bed. Our boy looks through the glass at the town below, where glowing patterns of lines and dots float across the sky. Watching the glowing signals hover over a tall spire, Luca recognizes the morning reveille and notes that the Holy Land has its own buglers. He remembers the leader saying that Luca will serve as their bugler and also take on the role of captain for their branched individuals. The leader adds that the earlier performance of Luca showed his capability. Luca reacts with surprise and confusion at the sudden statement that he is to be a captain. He explains that Luca will be responsible for issuing commands on the field and managing the other branched individuals outside of battle. The leader states that each branched individual is unique and irreplaceable, asking Luca to keep them in peak physical and emotional condition at all times, which causes Luca to grimace. Back to the present, Luca remembers the pontiff asking how the position of captain suits Luca, and our boy answers that it does not suit him at all while privately reflecting that he has been given a troublesome assignment. Luca looks down to find a man bound tightly in heavy ropes lying on the bed, who greets him with a morning salutation. The tied man introduces himself as Miura, a fellow branched individual, and confirms Luca's identity while Luca looks at him in surprise. Miura apologizes for disturbing Luca at the crack of dawn and requests that Luca untie the ropes holding him. As they walk down the corridor, Miura remarks that Luca did not see him at his best and notes that they are now bunkmates and the newest recruits since he joined 4 months prior. Luca asks for an explanation regarding why Miura was tied up, but Miura dismisses the matter for the moment. While moving past the large stone arches of the manor, Miura explains that the pontiff instructed him to show Luca the daily routine of the grounds, noting that there is not much to it. Miura lists their daily duties of attending worship, cleaning, and drilling on the grounds, adding that they are not permitted to leave, which prompts Luca to inquire about the nature of the training drills. Miura details that they learn about weapons, armor, and horse handling, explaining that they are required to run laps around the manor in full gear just like regular infantry drills, while Luca pants heavily from exhaustion. While heavily panting, Luca asks about the location of the remaining troops. Miura answers that the other soldiers are slacking off and notes that they are not a cohesive unit. Miura explains that the group has never even shared a meal together and adds that he is normally the only one running laps on the field, just as Luca loses his footing and falls to the ground. He stands over the fallen boy and extends his hand, stating that he finally has a companion to join him now. Miura continues his thoughts as a simple meal of bread and porridge sits on the wooden table, noting that while they are not entirely free, they receive everything they need. Sitting across from each other at a long table inside the vast hall, Miura suggests to our boy that living in the manor is actually a decent arrangement. Luca eats his food and internally reflects that Miura might be right, but he reacts with sudden surprise when Miura mentions his appointment as captain, quickly stating that it was the pontiff's choice and not his own. Our boy further explains that he never asked for the title because he dislikes being in battles, but Miura responds that it does not matter. Miura raises his wooden cup and states that when the pontiff makes a call, which prompts a confused response from Luca. He takes a sip from his mug and concludes that their own opinions do not matter, leaving Luca to look downward in silence. Miura places his wooden mug on the table with a loud clunk, starting to say something. He begins to tell Captain Luca that there is something he needs to know, but a sudden knock on the door interrupts him. Demi enters the room and announces that they have a job to do. Miura greets Demi and asks about the assignment, while Luca watches in silence. Demi explains that the group is being sent to take back a captured fort. The scene transitions to the active military camp established on the plains outside the walls of the large stone fortress. A commanding soldier stands inside a large tent and explains that the target is a former logistics base that was previously abandoned due to a lack of practical utility. He continues his briefing to the gathered leadership around a table, noting that one of their patrols discovered the fort is now occupied despite previously being thought empty. The four branched individuals sit together and listen to the briefing in silence. The commander details that there are about 100 men inside who are likely deserters from a different battlefield, but he notes that the fort itself is nearly impregnable. He explains that the fort is situated in the middle of a broad river and can only be accessed by a stone bridge on either side, adding that a battering ram is already on hand and ready for use while the soldiers outside laugh together. The commanding soldier explains that he determined the mission was beyond the capability of his unit alone, which is why he sent his fastest rider to Thermi. Commander notes his surprise that the pontiff made the journey himself, while the leader states that it is an opportunity to gain valuable field experience. The commander observes the visitors and notes that they must be the fabled branched individuals. The leader calls out to Miura, who acknowledges the call. The pontiff remarks that he believes Miura has not yet joined a battle, and Miura confirms that the statement is correct. The leader accepts the situation and prepares to deliver his orders. The leader addresses Luca and Miura directly, explaining that this mission is a chance for the two of them to show their mettle. Miura states his willingness to comply, prompting the leader to announce that the operation will begin at nightfall and explain how the plan will proceed. Outside the military camp as the wind blows past the line of tents, Luca sits quietly against a large tree when Demi calls his name. Demi stands before Luca and instructs him to cover his eyes with a piece of cloth, which our boy takes while noting that it is a blindfold. Demi explains that guarding their eyes from the sun will improve their night vision because the attack will happen at night, directing Miura to cover his eyes as well. Miura receives the cloth and expresses his appreciation while sniffling with tears on his face. Luca observes the tears and points out that Miura is crying again, which causes Miura to offer an apology. Miura states that he knows he is pathetic, but Luca clarifies that he wants to know what is wrong. With trembling fists, Miura confesses that he is a coward who is terrified of the upcoming mission tonight. Luca acknowledges the statement about fear and mentions that Miura must be a powerful individual, adding that he saw Zoe in combat that day and it was crazy. Miura replies he does not want to be compared to her. Miura notes that some branched individuals are exceptional while others are not, revealing that he is even afraid to use his own special ability. Miura explains that the object growing from his skull caused him to be bullied heavily as a child, leaving him with a deep sense of fear. He concludes by admitting that his fear of being forced into combat even made him try to escape from the manor the day before. Miura explains that Demi and the pontiff's troops caught him when he tried to run away. Our boy realizes this explains the ropes he saw on Miura that morning, while Miura notes that a similar thing happened when the leader first found him. Miura describes how the attack by the garland completely destroyed his house, his town, and his mother, wiping everything off the map. He recalls that the pontiff appeared afterward and proposed that they work together to take revenge against the garland. Miura explains that he initially believed this was the correct path for him to take. He notes that since his entire family was gone, the pontiff stated it was natural for him to seek revenge. Miura reveals that no matter how much he tried to hate the garland, he was unable to do so. Looking back at the ruins, Miura confesses that his only true feeling was relief that he was not the one trapped under the rubble. As the wind blows through the trees, Miura tells our boy that his survival in the upcoming night mission depends entirely on him. The guy reflects that he must try to survive even if everything is completely falling apart. Miura begs his captain to try and keep him alive during the operation, prompting Luca to look away and pull his blindfold over his eyes while muttering that he never agreed to become a captain. Under the bright full moon, guards stand watch along the high stone walls of the occupied fortress as one of the men complains about the freezing cold and hunger, expressing a clear desire to return home. Looking down from the ramparts, another soldier asks his companion what will happen next to them now that they are stationed at the fort, and the other guard agrees. The guards peer across the long stone bridge spanning the river and notice a lone figure standing on the opposite bank, considering whether it is a lookout from the Holy Realm. One of the guards assumes that the enemy forces will not initiate an attack in the middle of the night. High above on the walkway, the wind blows fiercely as Demi stands beside Luca and tells him that he needs to perform his duties well, which catches the young bugler off guard. Demi explains that they did not bring Miura back to the manor just to let him perish needlessly in a location like this fort. The pontiff approaches Luca on the walkway to inform him that the troops below are fully prepared, stating that the entire operation will begin at the sound of the bugle signal and asking if he is ready to proceed. Luca answers that he might be ready, prompting the leader to acknowledge his response as the boy lifts his brass instrument, presses the valves, and takes a deep breath to begin. Our boy blows his horn from the castle ramparts alongside Demi as the command sounds to begin the operation, causing glowing patterns of light to form in the night sky. The enemy guards look up in surprise as the loud horn blast echoes across the area and the grid of lights takes shape directly above them. On the ground below, Miura stands ready in a clearing as a vertical beam of light descends from the sky to mark his position. A guard peers over the edge of the fortress wall and notes his confusion about what is happening while two parallel lines of glowing light suddenly stretch down the entire length of the stone bridge. An overhead view shows the long stone bridge completely lined by the glowing tracking path, leading directly over the river toward the massive fortress entrance. Miura crouches into a starting stance on the path as the branch on his head makes a sharp cracking sound and several large protrusions emerge from his back. The pontiff announces that the rapid assault may commence, and Miura immediately drives his foot into the ground to launch himself forward with a blast of dust. Following the line of light, Miura sprints across the stone bridge at extreme speed, leaving a massive trail of smoke and dust behind him. As the horn blast continues to sound, Miura reaches the fortress gate at blinding speed beneath a widening triangular pattern of light while a burst of stone breaks from the ground. An enemy guard looks upward as a swinging Miura flies through the air along a line of light. Miura lands on his feet inside the courtyard of the large stone fortress. During the earlier strategy meeting, Miura addresses the leadership to confirm if the plan requires him to enter the fortress completely alone. The pontiff confirms the statement and explains that Miura needs to create a distraction inside the structure to lower the enemy defenses at the front gate. Luca asks for an explanation regarding how Miura intends to get past the walls. The pontiff states that Miura moves with extreme speed and can jump over the fortress walls in a single leap, while in the present, the enemy guards notice the bright light and demand to know the identity of the intruder. The leader adds that Miura's special ability has a major flaw because his eyes cannot track his physical movement at such high speeds, and Miura agrees with the statement. Miura explains that he is highly likely to crash into objects and injure his body because he is not durable, which the pontiff notes is correct. The horn blast continues to echo as the plan relies on the guided line of light to navigate the terrain, leaving the enemy soldiers confused by the signal. The operation relies entirely on the light generated by Luca's horn sound to guide Miura as he dashes across the courtyard, striking down enemy soldiers along the path. Even in the deep dark of night, the glowing signals from Luca continue to clearly mark the route forward for Miura. During the strategy briefing, the pontiff explains that Luca must depend on Demi's eyesight during the operation because her eyes can track even Miura's extreme speed. Inside the fort, the sound of the bugle echoes loudly as Miura moves past the guards, who note the sound of the war horn and realize they are under an enemy attack. An overhead view shows the zigzag path of light marking Miura's movements through the courtyard, while our boy states the realization that Miura will die if Luca makes a mistake, which the pontiff confirms is true. Demi and Luca stand together on the high walkway as Luca presses the horn to his lips, internally recognizing that carrying the lives of his comrades is exactly what it means to be a captain. Earlier that day while sitting under a tree, Luca instructs Miura to wait for the right moment once he is in the thick of battle and then provide him with a signal. While resting against the tree with his eyes covered by the blindfold, Luca states that he will help Miura escape. Miura sits nearby with his arms wrapped around his knees, looking toward Luca and asking for an explanation regarding how he can achieve an escape. During their conversation under the tree, Luca states that Miura can run away safely as long as a path is provided, noting that Miura wants to be free from these people. Miura agrees but states that leaving without permission is a capital offense, adding that the same rule applies to anyone helping a deserter. Luca replies that he already knows that information. Our boy remarks that deserters are usually executed, but Miura tried to escape the day before and the troops only brought him back, concluding that the branched individuals are simply too valuable to be killed. Luca states his belief that they would receive a light punishment, prompting Miura to express uncertainty and state that he wants to know why Luca is helping him. Our boy explains that he understands Miura's feelings to some degree. In the present, Luca internally reflects that he also wants to quit his current job. Down below, the enemy soldiers warn each other to stay away from the light, call for torches due to the darkness, and state that they should never have come to this location. Meanwhile, Miura focuses his gaze and charges directly down the street along the guided path, rushing toward a group of 3 enemy soldiers and killing them as the light lines extend past them. Outside a building, a lone soldier holds his food and remarks that a crust of rye is a poor selection for his last meal, just before Miura flashes past and strikes him down. His severed head falls to the ground. Miura continues his relentless advance through the structure, running at maximum speed along a straight, glowing path that guides his movements. An overhead view reveals the massive network of lines and dots created by Luca's signal, marking a complex path that winds through every section of the fortress layout. The heavy wooden barricade breaks apart with a loud crash. A group of armored guards with spears stands in the opening, expressing confusion at the sudden breach. Through the large stone gateway, the enemy soldiers run away into the distance. The remaining guards look on in surprise, stating that the enemy forces are fleeing. The pontiff praises the group for their success. On the castle ramparts under the full moon, Demi and Luca stand nearby while Miura sits on the stone floor, panting from heavy exhaustion. The leader states that the award for distinguished service belongs to Miura. Miura pants heavily and offers his thanks, while Luca watches him silently from a short distance away. Our boy asks Miura why he chose not to run away after being told to give a signal. As Miura continues to catch his breath, he reflects that having Luca around means he is no longer alone. Miura tells his captain to forget his previous words. Luca responds that he understands the situation, which leaves Miura looking back at him in silence. The next morning, sunlight fills a large stone manor. Walking down a long pillared hallway, the leader begins to speak about a specific plan. He states that Miura intends to resign from his position once they have successfully defeated the Garland. Luca confirms that the statement is correct. Our boy explains that the leader will still need to provide financial support for both of them after they quit their duties, prompting the pontiff to consider the request in silence. The pontiff asks if this is Luca's official stance as captain, while our boy looks on with confusion. The leader explains that a soldier's career path is decided by a superior officer, noting that the request shows Luca has formally accepted the captain role. Luca accepts the situation as long as the pontiff agrees to those specific terms. The pontiff asks Miura if he agrees with the arrangement, and Miura answers that he does, prompting the leader to state that the matter is settled. The leader tells Luca that he expects great things from him as the captain. Our boy points out that the pontiff can be reasoned with, but Miura expresses doubt about whether this decision is for the best, causing Luca to respond with confusion. Miura explains his reasons for fighting, stating that he is not trying to avenge his family or retake his homeland for a grand cause. Miura reflects on fighting merely to quit and notes that he always runs away. But Luca stops him by saying it doesn't matter. Our boy states that the entire world is bad anyway and notes that anyone would want to escape from it. He tells Miura to simply accept the situation. Miura suggests that Luca might be suited to the position of captain, but Luca rejects the thought completely. Meanwhile, Demi is moving through the wide hall. Demi walks down a staircase and knocks on a door before entering to inform the pontiff that an imperial regiment is marching 300 miles from the Holy Realm, noting that they have several branched individuals with them. The pontiff acknowledges the news. The leader, now wearing the head of Gerhardt, sits alone at a table, smiling as he states that they will have fun. Far away, a massive ball of swords and spears floats high above a battlefield as the pontiff observes that a war between the branched individuals will finally begin. An armored hand clenches into a tight fist before opening wide directly below the floating cluster of weapons. The weapons launch violently downward, striking the soldiers who are attempting to flee across the field. Near a horse, an Imperial soldier observes that they have not reached their destination, and his companion notes that they are not yet inside the holy territory, concluding that their march must continue forward. Standing in front of a massive army of spearmen, the Imperial leader states that the plan is to kill the Bugler Kid to bring peace to the world, and his partner confirms the objective. The fourth chapter begins with the title First Campaign. Miura and Luca walk down a dark stone staircase inside a tunnel. Miura holds a small lamp to light the way and asks Luca if he brought a knife, and Luca confirms that he has one. As they continue moving down the stone path, Miura asks if the rations are packed. Our boy answers directly that they are ready. While walking side by side, Miura wonders if they will be assigned to separate coaches, and Luca replies that he thinks that is the case. Miura explains that Luca is the only person he can truly talk to, and our boy notes that he feels the same way. They step out of the dark stone archway into the outdoor camp. Miura calls out to the waiting group, stating his hope that they are not arriving late. The pontiff stands in the center of the camp between two large wooden coaches. Looking over the gathered branched individuals, he asks if everyone has arrived. The other branched individuals look back in silence. The leader faces forward and states that it is time for the group to depart. An armored soldier on horseback leads the line of wooden coaches through the massive gates of the fortress beneath a towering stone spire. The pontiff reflects that this mission will be the first true campaign for the branched squad while Luca looks out from the window of his moving coach. A while ago, inside a quiet hall filled with stone arches, Luca sits on a wooden bench and practices his trumpet in front of a music stand. The pontiff stands by a pillar, watching the boy play and noting that Luca practices his music with a great amount of zeal. The leader walks past the bookshelves and asks if Luca is already able to read sheet music. Our boy explains that the musical tones are not a problem, but he is currently having trouble with the lengths of the notes, though he expects to understand them soon. Looking at the open sheet music on the stand, Luca credits his progress to the leader's teachings. The pontiff replies that Luca does not need to thank him because the lessons were a condition of his service, adding that Luca will contribute much to their cause, which leaves the young bugler feeling confused. He clarifies his statement, announcing that starting tomorrow, Luca will lead his fellow branched individuals in a new campaign. The leader details that 3 days ago, Demi discovered an Imperial force entering the Holy Realm. He adds that this enemy army includes a branched foe whom Luca will meet in battle alongside the garrison troops stationed at Fort Cannoli near the border. Our boy holds his trumpet tightly and inquires if the enemy branched warrior is the Garland. The pontiff explains that it is a different warrior, noting that the empire has several branched individuals in its service just like their own group. The leader raises his index finger to emphasize that he has one more specific request for Luca during this upcoming campaign. He explains his request, directing Luca to strive to strengthen the bonds of camaraderie between the members of his squad. The boy reacts with a look of concern, noting that this task has nothing to do with the actual military mission. The pontiff states that the impending battle at Fort Cannoli will involve 7 of their own branched individuals, including Luca himself, and advises the boy to get to know them before that time. Luca accepts the reasoning. The leader concludes that as their captain, Luca must win the trust of his comrades. Back to present, the caravan of horses and wooden coaches travels across the open mountain landscape. Inside one of the moving carriages, Luca looks at his silent companions and recalls the advice to begin his role by learning about their individual abilities. Luca observes Demi is sleeping soundly on the bench while a girl with a horn on her head sits nearby, repeatedly gnawing on her fingers. Luca leans forward to address her directly, causing her to jump slightly in surprise. The girl stammers nervously, asking if Luca is truly speaking to her while the other soldier continues to sleep. Our boy confirms his intent and introduces himself by name, asking for her identity as she struggles to find her words. The girl hesitatingly introduces herself as Poppy and forces a smile, stating that it is good to meet him while giving a thumbs up. Luca watches in surprise as blood begins to ooze directly from the tip of Poppy's raised thumb. Luca explains that he wants to understand the unique branch powers of the entire squad before the major battle begins and asks Poppy to demonstrate what she can do. Poppy reacts with sudden worry, clutching the front of her cloak. Trembling from head to toe, Poppy asks if a member with useless power will be expelled from the team. Our boy immediately reassures her, stating that nothing of the sort will happen to anyone. Poppy expresses her relief and agrees to show her power while Luca sits across from her and listens quietly. Poppy turns around and raises her open hand toward a wooden box on a nearby shelf as the branch on her head makes a distinct clicking sound. The small wooden box begins to rattle and vibrate intensely against the wooden wall, causing Luca to call out in surprise as the object begins to lift. Poppy explains that her power allows her to manipulate and move physical objects without touching them while the crate floats steadily in the air. Our boy calls the ability amazing and notes that she could likely use it to send enemy soldiers flying during combat. The small wooden box lands back on the shelf. Poppy looks down at her hands on her lap, noting to herself that it takes all of her focus just to lift that single small object. The girl covers her mouth nervously, offering an apology for being useless and calling herself worthless. Luca looks on and tells her to stop putting herself down. Poppy smiles faintly and suggests that her power could become useful if she works together with Demi. She addresses Demi directly to ask if that is correct, but Demi looks away with a cold expression. Demi tells the girl not to speak to her and calls her a fool. Poppy immediately lowers her head and offers a quick apology. Our boy watches the interaction and silently reflects that Demi is a very prickly person. Meanwhile, Poppy covers her mouth and mutters a quiet insult about Demi under her breath. Luca hears the murmur and asks Poppy what she just said. Suddenly, Demi calls out to him. Leaning against the wall, Demi states that there is nothing to be gained from getting involved with the freaks and idiots in their group. She explains that she is merely offering some free advice. Our boy looks back at her with a confused expression, wondering why she is choosing to share this thought with him at this moment. Demi details that everyone in the squad has a few screws loose, pointing out both Poppy and the sleeping Zoe as examples. Poppy listens in silence while Luca looks down at Zoe, wondering about the true nature of his squad. She looks over at the sleeping girl and notes that on the inside, Zoe is actually a child. Demi explains that due to her branch power, Zoe has the body of a 27-year-old but possesses the mind and emotional maturity of a 9-year-old girl, causing Luca to react with surprise. She clarifies that Luca is dealing with a kid who has the physical power to slaughter scores of trained soldiers, as a vision shows Zoe easily defeating a large group of enemy troops. Demi warns that provoking Zoe or causing her to have a temper tantrum will result in everyone being killed. Poppy states that it is best not to mess with Zoe. Demi adds that the individuals traveling in the other coach are all deranged in their own distinct ways, warning that a single wrong word will bring about completely avoidable trouble while the caravan continues its journey through the mountains. The command states that the caravan will stop shortly to change horses and will repeat this stop every 20 miles, allowing the group to mingle. During the break, Miura sits on a large log next to our boy and remarks that he understands Demi's perspective, and Luca agrees. Miura explains that the squad members do not need to be close friends to effectively pull their weight in battle while infantrymen tend to the horses in the background. He smiles and adds that despite their differences, he understands exactly where the pontiff is coming from with his request. Miura tells Luca that he has a feeling the young captain will manage to get along with just about anyone in his own way. Sitting on the log, our boy asks Miura how things are going inside his own carriage. Miura explains that he is riding in a coach with Cora and a man named Oscar. A tall man stands behind Luca. Miura notices the tall man and nervously calls out Oscar's name. Oscar suddenly steps closer and drops his hand down, prompting Luca to look over his shoulder and inquire if there is something he can do to help him. The guy sits down heavily on the log right beside Luca and places his arm around the boy's shoulders, asking Luca to explain the reason why he fights. Luca looks up in confusion as Oscar continues his inquiry, asking if Luca's motivation to fight is for the sake of another person or someone in particular. Oscar leans in even closer, demanding that Luca answer him quickly because he does not have all day and this is all he wants to know from the boy. Our boy sits quietly and answers that he is not fighting for anyone, explaining that his true desire is to be a maestro and this job allows him to study music, which leads Oscar to repeat the title to himself. Oscar narrows his eyes with a cold look, stating that in this day and age, Luca has absolutely no business pursuing a path like that. Luca reacts with surprise as the guy explains that wars are currently raging everywhere and notes that since Luca was born as a branched individual in this land with the threat of the Empire looming over them, fighting for a silly hobby does not sit right with him. Luca looks back at Oscar and states that he wants to know in what specific day and age his dream would be acceptable to Oscar, adding that he intends to take a nice long nap until that time comes. Oscar tells the boy that he is going to make his own point completely clear. Oscar commands Luca to state that he fights for his holiness, delivering a direct threat that he will kill the boy if he refuses. Luca reacts with complete confusion to the sudden threat while Oscar remains quiet for a brief moment before explaining that he owes everything to the leader and has pledged his entire life to pay back that debt. Luca shouts directly at Oscar, stating that it is good for him but adding firmly that he does not know what Oscar's personal situation has to do with him. Oscar argues that Luca also owes a debt to the pontiff for taking him in and insists that all debts must be repaid. Our boy fiercely rejects the statement, shouting that he was not some lost little lamb and explaining that they simply made a mutual deal, which is the only reason he is working for the leader. Luca points his finger and calls out to Miura to ask what is wrong with the man holding him. The view cuts between the windy forest background, Miura peering out from behind a tree trunk. Seeing his companion hide, Luca internally calls Miura a coward while Oscar ignores the distraction and demands that Luca give him an answer. Oscar tells Luca to just say the words, explaining that swearing loyalty to His Holiness sets a good example for the rest of the squad, but our boy firmly answers that he is not swearing anything to the holy man in the helmet. Oscar utters a brief response as his hand clamps down in a powerful grip on the boy's shoulder, catching Luca off guard. Suddenly, another hand touches directly into Oscar's face to break the hold. With an intense expression, Luca pushes forward and forcefully shoves Oscar away, causing the tall man with a snapped neck to lose his balance and fall backward off the log onto the grass. It appears to be a girl behind the log and she tells Oscar that his behavior will not do. She explains that he cannot go around snapping the neck of anyone who makes him angry, leaving Luca looking up at her in shock. Oscar crouches on the grass as a clicking sound echoes from his neck. He remarks to himself that he refuses to put his life in the hands of someone who does not share his goals. Oscar's neck heals with loud popping and cracking noises. The girl smiles and asks what the actual harm is in his behavior, while Luca watches the transformation in disbelief. He stands up and snaps his neck back into position. The girl addresses his previous comment about his life, noting that Oscar is immortal after all. Oscar turns around and starts to walk away, leaving a sweating Luca to stare after him in complete shock. As Oscar walks away with steady footsteps, the girl asks Luca if he is alright, and Luca sits on the log and confirms that he is fine. Our boy suddenly recognizes the girl and points out that she healed the wound in his guts. The girl smiles and introduces herself as Cora, confirming that she is his savior. Luca asks for an explanation of what just happened. Cora answers that it was simply the result of her branch power. Cora details her special ability, explaining that it allows her to transfer injuries and illnesses to others at her own will. She explains that at the exact moment Oscar broke Luca's neck, she shifted that injury to herself and then immediately transferred it back to Oscar. Our boy silently realizes that Oscar genuinely intended to kill him. Luca inquires if transferring the injury to herself first caused her pain, and Cora clarifies that it only lasted for a fraction of a second, so she did not feel anything at all. Cora points out that the stomach wound Luca previously had caused her pain for quite some time. Luca expresses regret, but Cora tells him to think nothing of the matter. She leans close to Luca and whispers that she is someone who actually savors pain. Luca looks up in surprise when a voice suddenly calls out his name. The pontiff stands in the open field and requests that Luca come over to him for a moment. Walking away, Luca reflects on his interactions and concludes that his squad members are a group of freaks, just as Demi previously stated. Our boy approaches the pontiff and Demi to ask what is going on, and the leader tells him that he needs to see the view ahead. As Demi looks out over the landscape, Luca covers one of his eyes to duplicate her tracking technique. A stone road winds through a dense forest where a scout keeps watch from the bushes. The observation reveals that the highway ahead has been staked out by enemy troops waiting in ambush. The leader states that the enemy presence is likely a vanguard meant to harass reinforcements. Luca asks if there is any way to go around them, but the leader clarifies that the only proper road goes directly through those woods. He details that an unpaved route would slow their advance considerably and delay their arrival at the fort. He concludes that these factors lead him to ask for a final decision. The pontiff addresses the boy directly and asks what they should do now that addressing him as captain. Inside the forest, the hidden enemy soldiers remain crouched among the trees and keep watch in silence. One soldier observes how quiet the area is, and his companion confirms that they still see nothing. A soldier reasons that if the incoming forces are making for Fort Cannoli from the holy capital, there is no way for them to avoid these woods. Just as the soldier notes that the incoming forces are bound to appear, a sudden arrow strikes him directly in the neck. The leader falls to the ground with a heavy thud, prompting the nearby soldiers to realize that their captain is dead. The soldiers shout that they are under attack and command the unit to hold the perimeter, while another soldier notes that he did not hear a single sound before the strike. An enemy soldier in the woods is suddenly struck by an arrow, causing his companion to wonder how the incoming forces can shoot arrows through such dense trees as the wounded guard slumps forward into the leaves. A loud scream echoes from deep within the forest, prompting a soldier to inquire if the enemy is causing trouble further inside, but his companion responds that there is no chance of that happening. The hidden guards reflect that the incoming troops could not slip into the forest without passing their position at the tree line, but a sudden horn blast rings out and causes a crouching soldier to look up in confusion. A bright beam of light descends from the sky and creates a glowing circle on the grass, causing the surrounding enemy soldiers to voice their confusion at the strange phenomenon. The allied soldiers launch a sudden ambush from behind, covering the guards' mouths and quickly eliminating them before any alarms can be raised. The squad members walk past the fallen bodies as another loud horn signal echoes and projects a guiding beam of light, directing the remaining soldiers to run down the stone road and follow the path to the next spot. Standing on a high vantage point, Luca lifts his brass trumpet to his lips and blows a powerful signal into the air. The horn blast projects 7 glowing vertical tracking paths across the vast forest layout to clearly pinpoint the location of every hidden enemy group. The entire branched squad stands gathered on top of the rocky hill while Luca continues to blow his horn, executing the plan to ambush each group of enemies in the woods one at a time. A while ago, Luca explains that Demi uses her eyes to locate the enemy targets, and he shares those coordinates with their squad to secure a major tactical advantage in the battle. The pontiff replies that in that case, the young captain needs to know a critical detail. The leader continues his explanation, stating that Poppy's unique branch power is perfectly suited for conducting effective ambushes against their opponents. As Poppy shoots an arrow, Luca recalls that Poppy has the power to manipulate and move physical objects without touching them. As the arrow flies, he remembers the pontiff confirming that although Poppy cannot manipulate heavy objects, her true strength lies in her extreme operational range. He notes that as long as she maintains continuous visual contact with a target, there is almost no limit to how far away the object can be. Poppy can use her focus to alter the exact trajectory of an arrow while it is actively flying through the air. The arrow is changing the trajectory targeting the soldier. It changes direction mid-flight and strikes an Imperial guard directly in the neck, causing a nearby soldier to react in sudden surprise. The surviving Imperial soldiers flee through the woods, wondering how the unseen enemy can pick them off through the dense trees with such perfect accuracy. One soldier orders the panicked group to stop questioning the attack and to run as fast as possible to regroup at their main camp. A loud horn blast echoes through the trees, projecting a vertical beam of light that pinpoints the fleeing troops. An Imperial soldier realizes that the combination of perfectly accurate arrows and the tracking light means they are fighting individuals who possess branch powers. A soldier spots a bright opening in the dense forest ahead and calls out that their camp is near, concluding that they do not stand a chance against the ambush. A person walks across the campsite toward a figure standing alone among the empty tents at the edge of the forest. Imperial soldiers realize they are completely outmatched against such monsters as Oscar stands upright with numerous weapons piercing his body amidst the fallen enemy troops. Oscar looks forward calmly as his wounds begin to heal and the weapons slide cleanly out of his flesh. He walks ahead, letting the discarded swords and arrows clatter onto the ground while the last remaining enemy guards flee. An aerial view of the campsite confirms that this initial engagement was easily won. Luca looks out from the open window of his moving wooden carriage as evening falls. The leader notes that the squad is to thank for their timely arrival as the caravan approaches a massive stone fortress built between the mountains. The caravan passes through a towering iron gate into the fortress, where Luca and his companions walk up a spiral stone staircase while garrison troops gather in the courtyard below. The leader explains that tomorrow's battle will be on a grander scale, advising the squad to rest well and prepare themselves. The door closes as he wishes them a good night while they lie on mats inside their sleeping quarters. The sun rises over the distant hills the next morning. Inside the fortress, the pontiff walks down a stone corridor with Luca following closely behind while carrying his trumpet. The pontiff states that in broad terms, the battle will progress exactly as he has explained. He adds that he leaves the entire matter in Luca's hands, and the young captain directly confirms his understanding. As they continue walking, the leader asks how things are going with the other squad members and wonders if they have become close friends yet. Our boy replies that one of his new companions almost killed him. The leader explains that every member of the squad is currently dealing with their own personal struggles, meaning a standard leadership approach will not succeed. He notes that despite this difficulty, he has no doubt that Luca will find a way to win their trust. The leader clarifies that the young captain's true assignment is not to increase his own physical strength, but rather to make himself loved by his subordinates. He continues, explaining that achieving this bond will slowly but surely serve the ultimate interests of their nation and the entire world. Luca listens in absolute silence. The pontiff adds that to reach this goal, he wants to see Luca supported and strengthened by gaining a wide wealth of practical experiences. The leader notices a sudden pause and turns around to ask if something is wrong. Luca tells the leader to listen carefully, firmly stating that he is the one who chose to accept the responsibility of being the captain. Luca reminds the leader that he previously swore to eliminate the garland and agreed to work in exchange for lessons on how to read sheet music. He explains that these personal goals are the only reasons he is helping the cause, adding that while he is willing to put in extra effort occasionally, there is a limit to his compliance. Our boy explains that everything he is currently doing is strictly for his own sake. Luca recalls Oscar's previous assertion that he has absolutely no business pursuing his personal musical dreams during the current times of conflict. Our boy firmly declares that he does not care about the threat of the Empire, the warrior known as the Garland, or the specific era they live in. As his feet move down the corridor, Luca states that all the heavy responsibilities being placed on him are entirely separate from his own business, instructing the leader to keep that fact in mind. The pontiff stands alone at the top of the stone staircase, looking down the long corridor as the young captain walks away into the distance. He reflects that Luca's uncooperative stance will not suffice, concluding that the young captain is the one person who cannot afford to remain completely detached and uninvolved in the conflict. The view shifts to the high battlements of Fort Cannoli, where the garrison looks out over the open fields at a massive imperial army gathered alongside several tall siege towers. Standing along the edge of the stone fortress wall with the members of the branched squad, the pontiff observes that the opposing enemy force is well prepared for the upcoming battle. The leader instructs Luca to step forward and sound the song of war. A loud horn signal sounds across the open sky as multiple lines of tracking light launch upward from the stone battlements of the fortress. The glowing trails arc through the air and curve down toward the pavement outside the gate. 6 perfectly straight vertical pillars of light anchor into the ground in front of the fortress wall as a person walks out alone from the dark arched gateway. The person who is walking is revealed to be Zoe. In the distance, the Imperial army stands in wide formations with their spears raised. An armored Imperial soldier looks out over a massive mound of scattered weapons toward the waiting lines of infantry and the siege towers. The warrior tightly grips the hilt of a sword. A while ago, inside the fortress meeting room, the pontiff announces that every soldier involved in the operation will carry out a specific mission. He explains that the regular enemy troops will be handled by the fortress commander, who nods in agreement. The leader adds that the local soldiers have been briefed on the branched warriors to ensure efficient teamwork, while 2 guards whisper to each other. The pontiff assigns Luca and his branched squad to focus their attention entirely on the enemy army's own branched individuals. Seated at the head of the strategy table, the leader states that they only know of a single powerful branched opponent and emphasizes that only Zoe can match that individual. He explains that Oscar will keep watch from a high cliff while the remaining squad members stand by in case of trouble, prompting Luca to inquire about the specific type of trouble they might face as he sets a piece down on the map. The pontiff clarifies that trouble refers to the sudden appearance of an unknown enemy branched warrior or the possibility of Zoe becoming incapacitated. Our boy points out that Zoe is the strongest warrior among them and wonders what could possibly bring her down, while the pontiff agrees that he cannot imagine anything defeating Zoe in a fair fight. The leader presses his finger against a wooden marker on the map to tilt it over, stating that Zoe possesses a critical shortcoming. The pontiff asks Luca if he has learned about the nature of Zoe's power. Our boy replies that he has not yet learned it and supposes it is only brute strength. The leader states that this assumption is incorrect as Zoe walks barefoot onto the battlefield. Zoe actually borrows her physical strength. She draws this power directly from her future self. Back to the field, the armored imperial warrior stands ready outside the fortress walls, while his sword is attracting all sorts of metal weapons. An imperial soldier expresses uncertainty to his commander regarding whether their army needs to attack the fortress directly. The imperial leader replies that the current plan is fine. While many weapons are gathered around his sword, he states that if he can defeat the woman serving as the first line of defense, he can eliminate the remaining forces of the Holy Realm by himself. He adds that if she is somehow strong enough to defeat him, all of their own soldiers will end up dead anyway. The imperial leader throws all of them into the air and explains that the entire outcome of the battle depends completely on the opening duel between himself and Zoe. As he prepares to hit the stack of swords, he commands his subordinate not to send their soldiers to their deaths in the meantime. The imperial leader uses his power to hit the single dense cluster of metal. He hurls the gathered weapons high toward the fortress wall. The cluster of metal breaks apart and rains down violently, striking the ground in a barrage of explosions directly in front of Zoe. The leader instructs his subordinate to wait until he breaks open the walls so the army can eliminate the enemy. The subordinate states that they are not eager to do so, prompting the leader to acknowledge the remark. As the smoke clears, she stands barefoot and unharmed among the fallen weapons. In a flashback, Luca asks about the details regarding her powers. The pontiff explains to Luca that if Zoe borrows 1 hour of future power, her base strength doubles for the duration of that single hour. The question remains what would happen if Zoe chose to borrow even more time as the leader launches another strike across the field. A mass of weapons descends from the sky toward Zoe, who watches the attack before reaching out to grip a large sword. Borrowing more time from the future results in even greater physical strength, while Zoe swings her sword against the incoming barrage. She unleashes a rapid series of slashes, deflecting and shattering the circle of incoming weapons that surround her. If Zoe draws upon 24 hours of power and condenses that strength into 15 minutes, the effect changes drastically as weapons shatter around her. Zoe would become 97 times stronger than her base form while the surrounding metal breaks under the immense pressure in the background. Once the combat ends, Zoe faces a major limitation because she must sleep for the exact duration of time she borrowed, as she drives her blade into the ground. This drawback explains Zoe's childlike mind, since she once drew an immense amount of power and subsequently slept for 10 whole years. The leader looks directly at Luca and asks if the explanation is clear, instructing him firmly not to forget these facts. Zoe is not completely invincible and remains a young girl at heart as she stands on the battlefield. Standing on the hillside, the imperial leader sees Zoe alive and commands his men to disregard his previous orders. A soldier addresses the imperial leader, who clarifies that their army will attack the fortress after all, ordering the horned warrior to grind down the enemy forces and inform their ally in the rear while he fights Zoe. He adds that these measures are a precaution in the unthinkable event that he falls in battle, prompting him to grab his weapons and prepare for the assault. Looking out from the stone battlements, a fortress soldier remarks that although he has heard many stories about the branch hexed individuals, they are clearly a serious threat. His companion agrees completely. As they watch the field, a soldier ponders what will happen if the situation worsens and wonders about the consequences if their own branched warrior faces defeat. Another guard answers that if that happens, the regular soldiers will have to fight the enemy branched forces themselves. The rest of the garrison troops gather along the wall, raising their weapons and shouting for the branched lady to give the enemy hell and tear them to pieces. A soldier lifts a drumstick high into the air, signaling to 3 musicians who raise their arms to begin the steady rhythm of war. The rhythmic beat of the drums echoes across the battlefield as the imperial flag flaps in the wind and rows of armored boots begin to move forward. A large wooden siege tower rumbles across the uneven terrain behind a line of imperial troops who carry spears and round shields. The drumming sound continues as everyone prepares for the war. Arrows fly through the air and strike the wooden siege engines while the ground forces push forward to establish a foothold against the garrison. Luca looks over the stone wall and notes that he does not see any catapults capable of launching boulders or dead animals at them. He also points out that the enemy has instead brought 4 large siege towers onto the field. Looking down at the layout of the fortress, our boy reasons that the enemy cannot capture the high third tier of the ramparts with so few proper siege weapons. Miura remarks that they could still be surrounded for days and inquires if Luca is worried about running out of food. Luca explains that he would normally worry, but this particular battle is different. The pontiff speaks from the strategy table and states that they are safe because they have Zoe on their side. The leader clarifies that Zoe's duel will determine the outcome of the entire battle and bring a swift end to the conflict. Miura listens quietly while Luca reflects that the leader spoke his exact thoughts. Cora sweeps several pieces off the table. Luca notes that the conflict will end too quickly for the fort to fall. He analyzes that the enemy's choice to attack means their branched warrior is either overconfident or possesses a hidden motive, before he turns to address Demi. A sudden, massive explosion tears through the lower courtyard before Luca can finish his sentence. The entire stone fortress rumbles heavily, causing Luca and Miura to cry out in shock. Poppy becomes too scared and hides behind the stone wall beside the leader. Luca looks down to see what happened. The heavy stone wall of the lower tier shatters completely under the force of the impact, leaving a massive breach filled with rubble and thick clouds of smoke. Miura stares down at the courtyard and asks about the source of the blast. Leaning over the battlement, Luca observes the ruined wall and concludes that it looks like damage from a powerful catapult. Our boy looks out at the battlefield and realizes that because there are no heavy weapons visible, a branched warrior must have caused the damage. The leader confirms her suspicion. He speaks up, stating that he can clearly sense the power of a branched individual at work. The pontiff notes that they should have realized the enemy had another branched user among them, and Luca agrees that he was thinking the same thing. The leader asks Demi if she can see the second branched enemy, but Demi answers that she cannot see them yet. She explains that all the imperial troops are wearing masks, meaning it will take her another 3 hours to check the face under every mask. Another loud blast hits the wall, causing Luca to declare that the walls will be destroyed in 30 minutes rather than 3 hours. The pontiff looks toward Luca and tells the young captain that it is time to show his quality. As thousands of enemy troops swarm the outer walls, the leader orders Luca to find the branched attacker among the 3,000 soldiers and destroy them. On the battlefield below, Zoe jumps down with an axe to strike the branched leader, who moves to defend himself as the force of their collision rattles the ground. Zoe's blade strikes the Imperial leader's armor, causing a bright flash of crackling energy to erupt from the impact point. Zoe drives her weapon downward, forcing the Imperial leader to slide back. She lunges forward again, but the Imperial leader turns away to dodge. She swings her blade low across the ground, which forces the man to leap high into the air to avoid the strike. As he stays high in the air, electricity crackles from a large metal sword stuck in the ground. He connects himself back to the weapon using the energy. A large explosion erupts against the distant fortress wall. The leader looks toward the smoke and tightly grips his sword handle, noting to himself that the main attack has started over there, so he must hold his own ground here. He leaps up and uses his energy to pull loose swords and shields into the air. He directs the gathered weapons to form a large spinning circle that moves toward Zoe. Zoe catches the flying weapons mid-air. As another sword rattles in the dirt, Zoe grips it and leaps forward to continue her assault. She hurls the blade directly at her opponent. The Imperial leader raises his shield to block it, but the force of the impact shatters his guard. The blast throws the Imperial leader backward through the air. He tightens his grip on his sword and calls out to Zoe. The guy points his blade at Zoe as electric currents connect his weapon to every metal pin in the field. He releases it and commands Zoe to die. The weapon launches toward Zoe at very high speed. The launched weapon flies past Zoe and causes a large explosion against the fortress wall. The metal object drives deep into the stone wall, cracking the bricks and releasing thick smoke. The guy looks back at the fortress gate and realizes that his direct attack failed to work against his opponent. He grips his weapon as weak electricity sparks around his hand, noting to himself that his stakes have lost almost all their charge and that they might have to retreat. Zoe looks down at her fist as a strange sensation ripples through her arm, noticing a small drop of blood on the back of her hand. She stares straight ahead with wide eyes as she processes it. The guy turns his head in complete confusion over her stillness. Zoe rubs the back of her hands together to clean her skin, but blood comes out again from her hand. Zoe begins to hiccup as she prepares to cry. She throws her head back and cries loudly while arrows and explosions strike the stone fortress wall behind her. The guy watches Zoe cry from across the field. He stands in silence while soldiers on the fortress walls look down at the scene in confusion. Zoe tries to stop her tears, rubbing her face before pulling her cape tight to prepare herself. She stops crying completely and looks ahead with total focus. Zoe lowers her body and takes a firm fighting stance on the ground. The guy catches his breath in surprise and quickly raises his shield to pull nearby weapons toward himself. Electricity crackles as loose metal pieces rush toward the Imperial leader while Zoe takes a single step forward. The gathered swords and axes form a heavy metal sphere around the shield. Zoe punches at the center of the metal mass, causing a massive explosion that shatters the weapons across the field. A small piece of metal strikes a soldier's helmet, prompting a sudden cry of pain. Another nearby soldier looks around in confusion as a barrage of broken weapon fragments rains down violently on the surrounding troops. The wounded leader sits heavily on the dirt as his round shield slips from his hand, rolling and spinning away across the battlefield. Zoe stands over the defeated leader and looks down at her fist, pointing out that his attack actually managed to draw a small drop of blood from her hand. The guy looks up at her with an exhausted expression and points out that he is bleeding far more than she is while he grips his weakly sparking weapon. A sudden blast erupts along the high stone ramparts of the fortress as a continuous volley of arrows descends from the sky. Luca peers over the edge of the battlement, noting that he cannot understand the nature of the attack since the enemy is not using standard siege ammunition, while Demi tells him to simply guess. Our boy turns around in confusion as Demi instructs the defenders to make an educated guess about the mechanics of the enemy assault. Luca says the task is easier said than done. Demi covers her face with her gloved hand and explains that even a random guess would give her a specific location to focus her search. Demi demands a direct order, stating that providing instructions is the captain's responsibility. Our boy looks over the stone wall to make an educated guess while arrows rain down near a large siege tower. Below the fortress, a massive formation of masked soldiers stands in straight rows across the field. Luca identifies the longbow unit as the main threat. He states that the other hidden branched enemy is located within this archery group as a masked soldier pulls back his bowstring to aim. The second part of the Battle of Fort Cannoli begins. A small insect rests on the bare ground. A young soldier calls out to his superior and asks what he is fighting for. The veteran soldier states that it is an unusual time to ask such a question, but the young soldier explains that he is simply curious. The infantry stands in a tight formation with their spears raised. He tells the boy to listen closely and asks if he joined the war for the money or if the act of killing excites him. Amidst the echoes of war cries, the veteran soldier explains that he fights so that his soul can enter the spire after his death. He recites the teachings of the deacons from his home, who say that the spire welcomes the soul in death and offers protection to a life well lived. The veteran asks if the boy wants to live in the spire where all dreams come true, and the young soldier admits that anyone would want that, though it feels more like a goal for the afterlife. The young soldier explains that he has not yet decided what he wants out of life while he is still alive. The boy continues his thought, stating that living only for what comes after seems like a waste of their time in the world. He asks if the senior officer cares for earthly things such as alcohol or women, but a sudden explosion rocks the fortress wall and causes the boy to look around. A blast hits the upper ledge of the stone fortress wall. Debris and broken rocks fall down toward the lower area where ranks of soldiers stand. The full scale of the battle unfolds outside the high fortress. Massive groups of soldiers move across the open terrain as smoke rises into the sky. Luca looks over the stone wall at the battlefield below. He states that the enemy longbow unit is responsible for the ongoing attack. Our boy notes that it is normally ineffective for longbowmen to aim upward at the high battlements. He explains that they should only be providing cover for troops on the ladders and siege towers. He continues his analysis, explaining that these archers are firing their weapons at random. He adds that they appear to be trying to break down the wall itself. Looking down from the high vantage point, Luca tells his companions that he believes certain special arrows mixed into the regular barrage are the ones causing the actual structural damage. He adds that the random shots are likely acting as a screen to hide those special arrows. In response, Demi tells him to wait. She signals that she has found the target among the mass of archers. The view reveals the specific face of the enemy hidden behind the mask. Luca turns to Poppy and commands her to shoot the target she is about to see. Poppy marks her understanding and prepares to take action. Poppy releases an arrow from her bow at the top of the fortress wall. The weapon travels high through the air toward the mass of enemy archers gathered on the field below. The launched arrow strikes an Imperial soldier standing right next to the intended target. The masked branched archer looks down as the companion falls to the ground. Poppy points out that another soldier blocked the hit, while Demi warns the group that the next enemy attack is already on the way. Luca asks Poppy if she can take control of the enemy's special arrow, but Poppy explains that she can only manipulate objects she has personally touched before. A large explosion strikes the stone tower directly behind the defensive line. The force of the blast causes the squad members to duck down. Miura states that the blast was very close, prompting him to deduce that the enemy is aiming directly at their squad. Luca then asks Poppy if she can shoot the enemy arrows down while they are still flying through the air. Poppy states that she will attempt to do so as she draws her weapon. Both Poppy and the enemy archer release their arrows at the same time, sending a volley across the sky. Our boy watches the sky from the edge of the wall and notes that while they can successfully block the incoming strikes for now, they still need to find a way to completely defeat the enemy. He considers sending a squad out through the front gate to engage the enemy in hand-to-hand combat but quickly realizes that leaving the safety of the fortress is a poor strategy just as another explosion hits the wall. Luca and Miura turn around to look back at their companion. Poppy holds her bow and informs the captain that she missed one of the incoming arrows. The Imperial army coordinates its attack as drummers beat a steady rhythm and lines of archers pull back their bowstrings together. A massive, synchronized volley of arrows rains down upon the stone walls of the fortress. Demi explains that the enemy is synchronizing their volleys, meaning Poppy will not be able to successfully block the incoming rain of arrows. Miura stays silent while Luca notes that failure is a regular part of growth, a statement that the leader fully confirms. A sudden explosion erupts near the defenders, prompting Demi to state that they must quickly eliminate the enemy branched warrior before the incoming arrows reach their position. Our boy begins to speak to Miura with a reluctant request, but Miura interrupts to ask if the captain wants him to deal with the enemy archer. Miura agrees to the task. Luca notes that moving through the enemy army will be far more dangerous than his previous mission, though Miura asserts that he can accomplish it. Miura adds that he now has a personal reason to fight and declares that he will succeed despite his fear, prompting the leader to call out his name. He gives a direct order for Miura to capture the branched archer alive if it is at all possible. Miura expresses his hope that he will return soon before vaulting directly over the stone battlements, leaving his companions behind on the high walkway. He lands firmly on the ground below near a ladder, dropping into a crouch as Luca prepares his trumpet. Miura runs across the open field directly toward the massive Imperial army, gathered under the distant pillar of directed light summoned by Luca. The lines of massed Imperial soldiers stand ready as the sound of the trumpet echoes across the terrain. Miura dashes forward at extreme speed, weaving past the front ranks of the enemy infantry, following the light direction. A barrage of arrows rains down around Miura as he shields his face and continues his advance. From the top of the fortress wall, Demi states that the incoming volley is approaching from a high angle, prompting Poppy to quickly release another arrow from her bow. Poppy's arrow strikes the incoming enemy projectile mid-air, but the heavy weapon maintains its course. Poppy expresses surprise, noting that she definitely hit the target but the enemy arrow is far too forceful and heavy to deflect. The pontiff analyzes the situation and concludes that the opponent is a branched warrior capable of altering the weight of their objects. Demi instructs the pontiff to step back to safety, but the leader tells her not to fear while Luca stands nearby holding his trumpet. Miura leaps high into the air over the rows of Imperial soldiers, landing a powerful strike against an enemy shield. He descends from the sky directly into the massive swarm of falling arrows, targeting the Imperial ranks arrayed on the battlefield below. The masked Imperial archer watches the descent and notes internally that Miura cannot change direction in midair. The archer reasons that because the descending warrior must maintain the same speed, he will inevitably impale himself on the incoming projectiles. Miura disproves the expectation by twisting his body mid-flight and reaching out to firmly grasp one of the falling arrows in his hand. Using his momentum, Miura skillfully maneuvers his body through the air and clears a safe path down by deflecting the surrounding arrows. In a brief flashback on the battlements, Poppy stands nearby with a worried expression while Luca hands a weapon over. Luca instructs Miura to take the item along just in case, explaining that it is an arrow Poppy has already touched. Back on the field, Miura lands safely and charges directly toward his target. The masked Imperial archer silently apologizes to a companion named Carl before Miura unleashes a massive sweeping strike that throws the surrounding enemy soldiers into the air. An arrow flies over the high fortress wall and strikes the stone walkway directly in front of the defending squad members. The projectile slides loudly across the stone pavement of the battlements and comes to a complete stop near a table where Cora sits. The captured Imperial archer drops heavily onto the fortress walkway. Miura climbs back over the stone battlement while breathing heavily from the exertion, informing Luca that he has successfully secured the target alive exactly as requested. The leader praises Miura for his effort, and Miura thanks the captain. Meanwhile, out on the open battlefield, Zoe observes that the armored opponent managed to draw blood from her hand, while the Imperial leader points out that he is bleeding far more than she is. Zoe explains that he simply does not like pain. She asks the man why he is attacking them, prompting the Imperial leader to tightly grip his weapon and the guy admits that he actually loves receiving praise and flattery rather than grand accolades or honors in death. He continues his explanation, stating that his commander wants to completely destroy all of the other spires except for the one belonging to the Empire while rows of enemy infantry stand ready. An explosion rocks the background as the guy explains that the army plans to eliminate the leader during this campaign and notes that the fortress bugler is currently standing in their way. He notes that returning to his superiors with the bugler's head would be considered a major achievement for him. The guy proposes a trade, asking Zoe to hand over the bugler so that they can leave without anyone else needing to bleed further. Zoe looks down at the warrior and directly points out that he is not bleeding at all. The Imperial warrior remains kneeling on the dirt. Zoe sees his head thinking it is like a potato. The warrior realizes that talking will not resolve the situation and tightly grips the handle of his weapon. Electricity sparks along the metal as the lines of masked Imperial soldiers watch the two fighters under the towering pillar of light. He attempts to strike, but Zoe easily catches him by the leg. She swings the entire weight of the large armored man high into the air with a single hand. The guy attempts to escape, targeting a pin with his electricity. Zoe looks at him calmly and asks if he is trying to flee the battlefield. He claims that he only needs to use the latrine. Suddenly, an arrow comes flying toward Zoe. Zoe maintains her firm grip on the warrior's leg. She raises her other hand, holding the single sharp arrow. Suddenly, the hand she is holding the arrow with, falls to the ground and the guy escapes. The Imperial forces watch from a distance. Zoe looks at the aftermath, noting to herself that the arrow is incredibly heavy. The Imperial army begins a full retreat across the hills, with commanders checking on the safety of Carl and the remaining troops. Zoe stands quietly on the open plain and looks down at her hand as the enemy departs. Zoe stands silent and rubs her hands together to clean them. A drum beats continuously as the Imperial army retreats across the open landscape. Near the wall, soldiers carry their wounded comrades away from the abandoned siege ladders. Looking down from the high, the leader observes that the enemy forces are in full retreat. The pontiff notes that Zoe appears to have driven off the opposing branched warrior. He asks Poppy if she can hit the enemy leader as he flees, and Poppy responds that she will try while pulling back her bow. Poppy's arrow shoots through the air toward the distant soldiers. The projectile suddenly loses its power mid-flight and drops straight down into the dirt far short of the target. Seeing this, the pontiff explains that the enemy is now outside of their spire dome, leaving Poppy confused while Luca seeks clarification on the term. The leader realizes that he has not yet given this information to his new recruits. He explains that the special abilities of a branched warrior can only work when they are within the physical range of a spire. The guy adds that the spires constantly send out an invisible energy. He explains that branched individuals take this energy and change it into different forms, which is the secret behind their power. He defines a spire dom as the area of land reached by a spire's energy, noting that this line ends right past the fortress and is how their national borders were originally made. The leader concludes that the enemy army chose to retreat because they knew about this boundary. Luca thinks that this important detail should have been mentioned to them before the battle began. He stands at the edge of the high wall and reflects that they have successfully captured one of the Empire's branched warriors alive, and it proves that Zoe can contend with the enemy's top warriors. Below in the courtyard, the garrison troops celebrate the major victory. The pontiff turns his attention to Luca and instructs the captain to sound the song of victory. Luca wonders silently about the meaning of their victory as he looks toward the sky. He raises his trumpet to his lips and positions his fingers over the valves to begin playing the signal. A loud musical blast echoes across the sky above Fort Cannoli while tracking lines of light launch upward from the stone battlements. Zoe looks upward. On the upper ramparts, Oscar looks out toward the horizon while the bodies of fallen troops lie scattered along the stone walkway. The victorious garrison troops raise their weapons high into the air and throw their helmets up to celebrate the successful defense of the fortress. Outside the walls, the open field is covered with broken siege ladders and fallen soldiers. A garrison troop kneels to search an imperial corpse and asks his companion if he has found anything worthwhile, but the other soldier replies that the imperial forces carry nothing of value. The kneeling soldier examines the uncovered heads of two dead imperial troops and notes with confusion that the men possess the exact same face. Later, the towering stone fortress stands quietly against the night sky under the bright light of a full moon. On a high balcony corner, Miura and Luca eat their food together while looking out over the large structure. Luca looks over the side of the stone balcony toward the ground below. In the lower courtyard, the pontiff stands with spear guards to speak with Oscar, who bows his head with a hand on his chest. Miura turns his head toward his companion and mentions that some of the passing soldiers approached him. Our boy asks what the soldiers said to him. Miura scratches the back of his neck and explains that the soldiers wanted to see his branch. He notes that the men seemed grateful and began touching the horn, which felt strange to him. He reflects that he was avoided for most of his life because of his branch, but the victory made it feel like a badge of honor. Luca leans back against the stone rampart and looks up at the sky, feeling that he has moved forward very quickly. He remembers his time with the mercenaries just as a sudden, bright beam of light slices through the dark sky and causes a massive explosion on a distant hill. Both of them looked up from the balcony as the sudden flash lights up the sky. Luca stares directly at the source of the blast with wide eyes. A powerful shockwave strikes the fortress wall, forcing Miura and Luca to shield themselves from the sudden blast. Amidst the disturbance, Miura loses his grip and accidentally drops his food. He leans over the balcony to watch the object fall down the rocky cliffside. He laments that half of his white bread is now gone as a strong gust of wind sweeps across the upper tier. Luca wonders about the source of the sudden explosion while looking around the terrace. At that moment, Demi runs across the stone walkway, calling out loudly for the captain. Breathing heavily from her run, Demi urgently instructs Luca to sound his horn for a full retreat so the squad can flee the fortress immediately. Luca expresses confusion and asks for the reason behind the order, prompting Demi to point her finger directly up toward the sky. High above the battlements, a massive comet-like structure is flying through the sky. Demi announces that this incoming strike is a direct attack from the warrior known as the Garland. A guy clears their throat to draw attention. He calls for a toast to celebrate the first harvest of the Pira farm. Inside the farmhouse, the family members raise their wooden mugs at the table. They shout a cheer together to mark the celebration. One brother tells the other to realize that they are finally farming on their own land. The second brother confirms the statement, noting that this follows 2 years of cultivating along with 3 more years of plowing and gathering livestock. The man gently touches the head of the swaddled baby. He notes that the process took a lot of time and effort, but asserts that life will be good from now on and they will have plenty of things to leave for sweet Pira. As the man sits at the table next to the food, a sharp knocking sound comes from the front door. The man opens the wooden door and asks for the identity of the visitor. Outside, a soldier holding a horse instructs the family to pack their things and leave the area immediately. He asks if the visitor is a soldier. The soldier replies that there is no time to waste because an impact will occur very soon. The man wonders what object is about to impact the area. Outside the house, a massive bright comet streaks across the night sky over the hills. After a while, every place looks empty and Luca is sounding his horn. Luca blows his trumpet from a wooden wagon to signal the troops gathered below the fortress while a glowing grid pattern appears across the landscape. A soldier reports to the commander that all troops are ready to march and local residents have been told to evacuate. The commander acknowledges the report and says it is very good. The commander explains that according to the branched warriors, the second strike from the garland will hit their location after adjusting its path from the first strike. He says they have 20 minutes to reach an old trench a mile away, ordering the rations and the wounded into the wagons while everyone else moves on foot. The surrounding squad members accept the order. Luca asks if his actions were good enough. The leader thanks him and states that he enabled a swift evacuation effort. Miura asks Demi if she can see the incoming attack from the garland and wonders if they will really survive once they reach the trench. Demi remains quiet for a moment before stating that she cannot know how widespread the destruction will be. Miura concludes that it might be too late anyway and if they are simply running as far as they can get. Poppy looks down and mentions that being immortal would be nice while Oscar watches her. A large column of troops and wagons retreats across the plains. Inside a moving wagon, Zoe sleeps quietly while Luca asks the leader to fill him in on the details. Our boy asks what exactly is coming down from the sky. The leader pauses and wonders where he should begin his explanation. The leader explains that understanding the method of attack used by the garland requires a lesson on a place called outer space. He tells his companion to picture the night sky stretching out into infinity. He adds that planets and rocks of all different sizes float freely inside that giant space. The leader reveals that the power of the garland works by pulling those floating space objects directly toward their planet. He states that these rocks falling down from space are known as meteors. Luca looks up at the sky while they sit closely together on the ground. The long dirt trench stretches far into the distance, filled with rows of soldiers sitting face to face along both sides. Demi sits against the wall and looks up toward the horizon. Nearby, Oscar rests on the ground while Mayuria stands up to watch the surroundings. Our boy looks down toward the family resting on the floor of the dirt trench. The mother smiles as she cradles her baby while the father reaches out his hand to touch the child. A massive blast erupts across the valley, sending out a giant ring of white light that expands over the mountainous terrain. The stone walls of the empty fortress stand still in the dark. A split second later, a brilliant flash of light strikes the entire defensive structure. The heavy stone walls of the fortress completely shatter, sending massive chunks of rock and stone flying through the air. Inside the abandoned farmhouse, leftover food and wooden cups remain on the tables. Suddenly, the powerful shockwave blasts through the room and fills the space with light. The wooden structure of the farmhouse completely breaks apart, disintegrating into a cloud of flying splinters. A parent bird rests on a branch to feed its small chicks inside their nest. The blast wave hits the tree, blowing the nest and the birds away in a flash of light. The tree and its surrounding branches completely tear apart, shattering into tiny pieces from the force of the explosion. The violent wind snaps the trees across the forest while nearby farm structures and livestock are swept away by the storm. From inside the safety of the trench, a soldier watches as heavy rocks and debris fly directly overhead. The remnants of the stone fortress and shattered rock pieces fly high into the dark night sky. A massive smoking crater remains in the landscape where the fortress once stood, surrounded by completely leveled hills. A hillside is completely covered in shattered tree stumps, while nearby slopes are reduced to bare earth with only a single broken wall remaining. The ruins of the settlement lie completely flattened. Luca stands still and looks ahead at the destruction while Mayuria sits on the ground behind him. A close-up shows Luca's wide-eyed face looking up in shock at the aftermath. A soldier places his hand on the commander and addresses him as Sir, while the commander looks away with tears streaming down his face. The father crawls on the ground and wonders about the location of their farm in the foothills, while the mother cradles her baby and he asks where the mountain went. A long line of survivors walks as silhouettes through the heavy smoke. Below them, a top-down view reveals a giant, perfectly circular crater carved into the ground. The leader offers to elaborate on the foe they face, identifying the enemy as the garland branched. 2 days later, a strategic map is laid out on a table inside the holy capital of Thermi as the group gathers around. The leader explains that as the squad witnessed just 2 days ago, the garland can summon meteors, while Oscar and Demi stand by listening. He continues his address to the group gathered around the table, stating that the sheer destruction cannot be overstated because a single strike can turn a small kingdom into an ashen wasteland. He notes that this long-range attack targeted Fort Cannoli all the way from the safety of the Empire. He goes on to say that the garland is not all-powerful, while Luca looks down silently at the objects on the table. The leader extends his hand over the strategic map, explaining that much like the squad members, the power of the garland is completely ineffective when out of range of a spire. He points his finger to an area beyond the twine boundary on the map, noting that the garland can still attempt to aim a meteor outside of their spire dome. However, he explains that the farther afield the projectile falls, the greater the targeting error becomes and the smaller the summon mass will be. The leader explains that this targeting limitation is the reason why the first strike was so far off the mark. He adds that unlike Fort Cannoli, the capital of Thermi falls too far outside the Empire's spire dome to be successfully targeted from their homeland. He outlines another major shortcoming of the garland, which is the absolute necessity for a long build-up period before launching any attack. 3 nations have already been completely wiped from the map, clarifying that there is a strict interval of 1 month between each individual strike. Cora asks if this timeline means the group now has a 1-month reprieve before the next attack can occur. The leader turns toward her and confirms that the assessment is correct. The leader states that it is time to summarize the strategy while the squad members stand around the table to listen. He explains that if the garland reaches the Holy Realm in person, this city will fall directly inside their attack range. Defending against the incoming invasion from the Empire is directly tied to protecting themselves from the power of the garland. He gestures toward the map and explains that defense alone will not be enough, meaning they must enter the Empire themselves to eliminate the garland and remove the threat. The leader taps a piece on the map and explains that during the single month they have available, they will form an alliance with another branched warrior who can stop the garland's meteor strikes. He instructs each of them to rest and recover for now, promising to provide more specific details in the coming days. The leader informs the group that they have permission to leave the manor this evening to visit the city proper. Luca walks along a stone terrace to look out at the wide landscape before heading down into the busy streets. The leader notes that while he apologizes for the strict measures, a victory must be rewarded and celebrated with style. Luca walks past a wooden cart and steps into a noisy local tavern where groups of people sit at tables. A branched guy lifts a full wooden mug into the air and calls for a toast to celebrate their victory at Fort Cannoli, prompting an immediate shout of agreement from the crowd. The squad gathers around a table filled with food. Miura raises his wooden mug to join the celebration. Demi points out to the newcomer that he was not present at the battle. Cora repeats the toast quietly. Luca looks at the unfamiliar man and asks for his identity. The loud noise of the celebration echoes through the ceiling of the crowded tavern as other customers eat at their tables. Zahid speaks to the captain and introduces himself by name. He explains that he is rarely sent into active battle but remains one of their branched comrades. Zahid welcomes the group. Luca responds that it is good to meet him too. Nearby, Demi takes a food plate from Mayuria and he offers a thanks, while Cora states that she would like some food as well. Poppy holds her empty bowl and asks if she can receive some food, but Demi tells her to serve herself. Our boy asks Zahid for the reason why he does not see much action in battle. Zahid explains that his branch power is not very helpful during a fight. Zahid points directly to the tiny branch on his head and states that it only gives him a small amount of luck and nothing more. He explains his ability by imagining finding a box of expensive spices while walking in the woods, or saving a girl from ruffians who turns out to be the daughter of a wealthy merchant. Zahid mentions that he is grateful for his power even though it does not work reliably. He reveals that he stitched together the uniforms the squad is currently wearing, meaning a bit of his luck protects them through the clothes. This revelation catches Luca's attention. Zahid points out that working as a bugler with hopes of becoming a maestro is a tough job for someone of Luca's age. Luca turns the conversation toward Zahid and asks about his own background. Our boy asks Zahid why he chose to work for their helmet-wearing leader. Zahid explains that he simply spent more money than he could afford on having a good time. He continues his explanation, stating that the holy leader stepped in to clear his debts, meaning he is now working to pay him back. The empty wooden mugs line up across the table. Cora calls out to Luca and asks him to offer his hand to her. Blood drips continuously from her palm, causing Luca to call out in sudden surprise at the sight. Cora asks the rest of the group to share the wound with her to mark the occasion. Demi tells her to keep the blood away from the food while Poppy recoils. Mayuria declares that Demi is completely crazy, but Zahid states that she is likely just drunk. Dozens of empty wooden mugs cover the tabletop. An intoxicated Luca rests his head on the table and admits that he is worried because he promised to kill the garland without actually knowing what he was dealing with. He places his scarred hand flat on the wood, noting that he only came to the fortress to practice his bugling and never expected to be forced to fight a monster. Zahid takes another drink from his mug, while Luca remembers how he once believed the Empire and the garland were none of his business until he witnessed the extreme destruction. Luca looks down and realizes that he cannot run away, noting that the war will soon affect him directly and concludes that it is scary. Zahid tells our boy that he understands and agrees with him completely. Luca asks if Zahid knows what he is saying. Zahid responds that even though he has never seen one of the meteors himself, he knows exactly how the captain feels. Zahid asks Miura if he understands as well, placing a hand on his companion who is completely passed out face down on the table. Luca then looks around and asks where the women went, prompting Zahid to explain that they left a while ago. Our boy looks down into the main room below at a family sitting around a dinner table. On the lower floor, the mother sits quietly in a chair while cradling her swaddled baby. From the upper balcony, Luca rests his chin on his arm and watches them silently. Zahid loudly declares that the matter is settled, catching Luca by surprise. He wraps his arm around the slumped Mayuria and proposes that they go to the bathhouse, causing our boy to ask why they would do that. Zahid explains that when someone becomes sad, they must start thinking simply. He adds that indulging a little bit creates good feelings that make a person eager to get back to work. He shouts for the group to go as they walk down the stone streets of the city at night. They arrive at the entrance of a large stone building where several attendants stand. Inside the building, Luca and Miura lie completely passed out on the stone floor. As Zahid stands nearby looking worried, a guy points a finger at him and states that he remembers him. The guy points his finger at Zahid, describing his face as that of a person who had fun with one of the ladies but failed to pay. Luca speaks from the floor, asking what a bathhouse has to do with ladies. Zahid clarifies that it is a type of bathhouse where a girl joins the customer. Zahid argues with the guy, stating that a service was added which he never requested in the first place. Nearby, Luca informs Miura that he chipped a tooth, causing Miura to ask if that is true. The guy orders Zahid to pay what he owes, warning that he and his friends will face consequences otherwise. A group of men appears at the entrance, drawing attention. A group of soldiers arrives at the entrance, loudly recognizing Luca as the bugle boy, and another guy notes that he is accompanied by other branched individuals. Luca looks up from the floor and asks for their identity. The men approach the group, asking Luca if he remembers the battle he led 2 weeks ago on the beach. The guy explains that their company was the one fighting down on the beach. Luca and Miura realize who the men are, while the guy asks what the problem seems to be. A large splash echoes as the entire group moves into a spacious, steaming public bathhouse filled with people relaxing in the water. Zahid relaxes in his individual wooden tub, noting that he originally hoped for a private room with a girl. In the background pool, the guy remarks that the recent battle was remarkable, prompting Luca to ask what he means by that statement. In the pool, another guy describes seeing floating stars and following them as they zipped around. The guy notes that they heard about the big victory at Fort Cannoli while Luca listens quietly from the edge of the water. The guy explains that they were out drinking with the troops from the fort, describing the battle sounds and lights as highly exciting. He states that all the men agreed they had never seen anything so beautiful in their lives, prompting Luca to look ahead thoughtfully. The guy confirms the statement. Another guy adds that the experience left him feeling deeply emotional regardless of whether the display was an illusion. They express their hope to see those lights again either in battle or in peace. Luca places his legs into the water with a soft splash and smiles slightly. Later on the town street, Luca waves goodbye to the group of soldiers. Behind him, Zahid is walking while carrying the passed-out Mayuria on his back. A view of the open sky highlights a passing trail of light, where they are walking together. As Zahid carries Mayuria up a grassy hill, he brings forward a realization that humans are merely tiny, insignificant specks when compared to the vastness of outer space. Luca follows closely from behind and inquires if he is doing all right. Zahid reflects that he would rather visit a bathhouse than travel to space any day of the week, noting that while the cosmos is likely a grand sight, his personal preferences lie elsewhere as the three figures continue over the ridge. Zahid states his belief in keeping things simple as he carries the unconscious Mayuria over the grassy hill while Luca watches him. They then approach a large wooden door that opens into the building with a loud creak. The leader sits quietly in a large armchair inside the room and welcomes the group back. He looks toward the doorway where the three companions stand and asks Luca if they can have a conversation. Standing together on the high stone balcony of the manor, the leader asks Luca if he enjoyed his night out in the city. Luca looks down over the edge and replies that the night was fine, before correcting himself to admit that he actually had a great time. The leader defines the response as excellent and expresses his hope that these pleasant moments will give the captain the necessary strength and determination to defeat the Garland. Luca remains completely silent as the two look out over the dark forest. Our boy looks down at the balcony railing, realizing that for a very long time, he was entirely convinced that the world was nothing but a miserable place. He looks up at the cloudy sky, remembering how he used to wonder why he should care about the dead bodies piled up across a broken world, reasoning that he could live with the reality as long as he did not have to witness the horror himself. Luca looks down at his own scarred palm and reflects on his recent experiences, remembering his companions playing cards at the table and the soldiers laughing together inside the public bathhouse. Our boy looks up with a new sense of wonder, coming to the realization that there is far more to the world than endless misery. Luca reflects that he had no way of knowing that playing his bugle was not the only source of fun or the only thing of true value, concluding that there is much more out there for him to discover. He reflects that thinking about life this way made him realize a world full of corpses is a bad thing. He begins to explain that this realization is his motivation to change, but he stops as the leader notes that the sun is rising. The morning sun rises over the vast city of Thermi, lighting up the sky around the towering stone spire as a flock of birds flies overhead. In the early morning light, citizens begin moving through the narrow city streets while local shopkeepers open their doors to display fresh trays of baked bread for the day. People gather in the public square to kneel in morning prayer toward a grand monument, while Luca watches the peaceful scene from his high vantage point on the manor balcony. Our boy rests his hands on the stone railing and states firmly that he will do everything he can to defeat the Garland. Luca adds that once the threat is gone, they can keep drinking, visiting the bathhouse, and even bringing ladies into the bath with them. The leader asks in confusion if Luca intends to bring ladies into the bath with them, prompting Luca to quickly back down and clarify that he meant something else entirely. The leader reaches into his robes and states that this sudden motivation gives him good feelings about Luca's next mission. Luca asks if the task is about finding the other branched warrior who can stop a meteor, just as the leader pulls out a decorative hand mirror. He holds out the ornate mirror and commands Luca to dip his face directly into it. Our boy looks at the item in surprise and seeks confirmation if he should submerge his face inside, which the leader firmly affirms. The leader instructs Luca to submerge his face into the surface exactly like washing his face. Luca takes a deep breath and tells the leader to proceed before plunging his face straight into the mirror with a clean splash. Luca's face emerges from a diamond-shaped mirror mounted on a tiled roof while a pigeon walks nearby. He shouts in surprise as he views a busy market square filled with people, stalls, and a tall church building. The leader explains that Luca now sees the kingdom of Gallia, the land of mirrors. He states that the ally they want to find is the looking-glass branched warrior of that country, while people below buy food from a market stall. An object drops into a liquid mirror. The leader explains that the way of life for the citizens in this land is tied entirely to the power of that branched warrior. The leader says that more excitement waits for the captain in that kingdom, and Luca agrees as he looks down at the city streets through the mirror frame. Zoe walks down a vaulted stone corridor. Cora approaches from ahead and asks if that is Zoe, wondering if she has only just woken up. Zoe nods silently in response. Cora explains that the group has already returned from their victory celebration in town and notes that it is a true shame. Cora adds that they had a large amount of fun. Zoe turns and walks away into the distance of the long, empty arched hallway. The narrative transitions to the summer of 1294 within the Kingdom of Gallia, where massive military forces deploy across the open plains and hills. Different groups of armored soldiers stand in organized rows under the sky, holding long spears and carrying flags marked with distinct kingdom crests. From a high stone vantage point, the helmeted leader and Luca look down over the battlefield at the multiple rows of soldiers assembled below the forest line. Looking up from the base of the hill, the leader states that their 300 troops will soon face roughly 500 soldiers from the enemy side. Inside the ruined walls, the leader explains that since they took the sea route to arrive at this location, their unfavorable numbers are an inescapable fact. The leader commands Luca to prove himself as the leader of the underdogs, and Luca looks down to state that he will do what he can while holding the bugle. A while ago, the helmeted leader addresses the seated squad from a map on a wooden podium, explaining that their next campaign will take them to the Kingdom of Gallia, also known as the Land of Mirrors. He points to a map and indicates that their destination is Gallia's capital city, Limoges, where its spire stands tall. He explains that this location is where they are likely to find Gallia's renowned hero, the Looking Glass-branched warrior. The leader states that their mission is to make contact and request the assistance of the Looking Glass-branched warrior. He adds that they face several obstacles along the way. A flag waves against a stormy sky as the leader explains that the Kingdom of Gallia is currently engaged in a civil war. The leader notes that regional factions have fought violently to gain control ever since the king went missing 1 year ago. He describes the internal conflict, noting that the Looking Glassists seek to place their branched hero on the throne. He adds that they are opposed by the royalists, who remain loyal to the absent king, creating a conflict that has divided the nation. The leader explains that he has shared a personal relationship with the missing king for many years, which has secured the cooperation of the royalists for their holy realm. He tells the listening squad that the Looking Glassists are not allies and will likely try to stop their progress to the capital city. He stands before the map and announces that a small squad capable of self-defense will accompany him and Luca on the journey. The leader calls out the names of the selected squad members, identifying them individually as Zoe, Demi, Oscar, and Zahid. Zahid raises his hand from his seat and objects that he cannot actually defend himself in battle. The leader responds by reminding Zahid of his specific luck, concluding that he will serve as the group's good luck charm during their journey abroad. In the present, the two opposing armies face each other across the open plains as a large pattern of parallel lines appears in the sky above the battlefield. The opposing commander remarks to his companion that beautiful formations are supposed to reflect a leader's talents, but notes that this specific display is ridiculous as more glowing lines form in the air. A long line of cavalry advances rapidly across the field, bracketed by the glowing lines as the ground rumbles beneath them. The commander watches the advance and states that the enemy is approaching, observing that their formations are tight but their tactics are amateurish. He wonders why the enemy would choose a straight-line charge against a force that outnumbers them. He points forward to order his troops to maintain their ranks, explaining that their own riders will wear away at the enemy flanks once the initial cavalry is handled. The commander declares that they will drive the tube-headed scoundrel from Gallia, while the helmeted leader and his squad watch the battlefield from the high stone ruins. The advancing cavalry suddenly changes direction with a loud roar, splitting into separate moving columns across the plains. The commander looks out over the field and realizes that the enemy forces have split up to target both wings of his own cavalry. He orders his troops to sound the charge immediately and commands his cavalry to move out and meet the enemy, prompting the hornblowers to blow their instruments across the battlefield. The two armies face each other under the glowing patterns in the sky as Luca's hand presses down on the valves of a bugle. The opposing commander watches in surprise as the enemy cavalry changes its formation mid-charge, shifting from straight lines into large triangles. The newly formed wedge of riders charges forcefully across the plains inside a glowing triangular boundary. The commander reflects that moving from a line to a wedge is perfect for piercing his ranks, and he realizes that his forces will be defeated if the enemy infantry reaches them now. A branched man riding a horse in the nearby woods calls out to the sweating commander, stating that he warned him about this outcome. The rider tells the commander that it is best to send their group into the battle quickly while his companions wait around the surrounding trees and rocks. The man points directly to the branch on his head and explains that only branched individuals can successfully deal with other branched opponents. The commander tells the group to make themselves useful, and the branched man smiles while adding that they will help as long as the commander honors his word. The scene shifts to a stone vault where the commander stands with his back turned, looking down at several bound prisoners kneeling on the floor under armed guard. The commander addresses the kneeling prisoners, stating that he regrets having to use criminal scum like them. He explains that they will instead serve the cause of the Looking Glass, while one of the bound prisoners mutters quietly with her head lowered. Standing before the barred cell, the commander tells the prisoners that if they prove themselves in battle, their sentences will be reduced. The horned prisoner laughs and asks why they should fight for the very ringleader who put them in these cells to begin with. The branched prisoner mocks the commander, noting that he must be short on fighters and adding that there is likely truth behind the rumors about all the missing branched individuals. The commander reacts with anger, ordering the prisoner to hold his tongue while he speaks. He commands the group to choose immediately between rotting in a cell for the rest of their days or winning their freedom on the battlefield. The narrative introduces the first two prisoners, starting with the alchemical branched warrior who can create weapons directly from his palms, identifying him as a skilled knife thrower who used people for target practice. Beside him is the elastic-armed branched warrior who possesses remarkably stretchy arms and operates as a master thief who has pillaged many treasure vaults. The profile continues with the soul-speaker branched warrior who can communicate with animals and once fed her entire hometown to wild beasts. The final member is the see-through branched warrior who stays completely invisible and spent an entire decade living inside a women's bathhouse. The commander declares that from this day forward the four individuals are a team, while the chaotic sounds of battle echo across the open plains. Back to the present, the alchemical branched warrior moves rapidly through the battlefield, throwing sharp weapons from his hands to strike down the opposing soldiers. The guy notes to himself that he is completely out of knives before realizing he can simply use his power. He focuses energy into his palm to create a new weapon, stating that he just needs to form another one. He asks a nearby enemy soldier to give him a second while the weapon forms in his hands. Before he can finish, other enemy soldiers strike him from behind with their spears, causing him to scream out as he falls to the ground. The elastic-armed branched warrior lashes his elongated limbs across the battlefield, whipping them in wide circles to strike at the surrounding enemy troops. The guy shouts that his attack range is as long as his limbs, declaring that his arms can stretch out a total of 13 meters. 3 enemy soldiers grab hold of the stretched limbs, shouting to each other that they have caught him and instructing their ally to hold him still. From a distance, the elastic-armed branched warrior panics and yells for them to wait and let go of his arms. An enemy soldier cuts directly through the elongated flesh. The severed limb flies through the air with a spray of blood while the elastic-armed branched warrior cries out in intense pain. Inside the woods, the soul-speaker branched warrior reflects that the other prisoners are not her true team. She charges out from the trees riding a massive bear alongside wolves and deer, stating that her companions speak to each other from the heart. A disciplined row of enemy soldiers brings forward their crossbows and unleashes a heavy volley of arrows. The projectiles rain down on the advancing animals, striking the bear and the wolves down mid-charge. 2 enemy soldiers stand over the fallen bear and the soul-speaker warrior, with one suggesting they have bear stew tonight and the other agreeing. Nearby on the battlefield, the alchemical branched warrior and the mutilated elastic-armed branched warrior lie completely motionless and defeated on the ground. The enemy commander panics and states that they are not done yet, noting that they still have the see-through warrior left to face. Meanwhile, Zahid sits on a stone block within the castle ruins while an unsheathed sword hovers silently in the air nearby. Zahid looks up at the floating blade, reflecting that this is the first time he has witnessed Luca's lights and sounds, concluding that the display is truly remarkable. Behind him is the invisible branched preparing to attack him sneakily. Suddenly, Zahid's branch creaks softly. An arrow falls on the ground. Zahid turns suddenly at a sharp thunking sound and looks down in shock as the invisible man loses his concealment on the arrow, revealing his body pierced through the back by the large blade he was holding, as he collapses onto the stone steps in a pool of blood. Luca sounds the massive horn across the plain as the remaining enemy army finds itself completely encircled by the tactical boundaries of the field. The surviving soldiers break ranks and begin running away into the safety of the woods. The enemy commander flees through the forest alongside his surviving men, loudly declaring that the captured criminals turned out to be a complete disappointment. Back within the ruins, the helmeted leader stands next to Luca and observes that ordinary troops are clearly no match for Luca's battle tactics. He thinks that he originally expected the kingdom to deploy much more powerful branched warriors against them. As he walks away with Luca, the leader reflects on the reports that branched individuals have gone missing throughout the land, concluding that the claims seem to be more than mere rumors. Zahid tends to retrieve the invisible branched while the helmeted leader commands the squad to gather the troops for departure after a brief rest. A long convoy of horse-drawn carriages travels across the plains as the leader notes the preference to reach their first proper lodging before dusk. The wagons rumble into a settlement at the base of a massive stone castle fortification built high along the hillside. The convoy approaches the grand perimeter walls of the fortress. The squad arrives at the fortress city of Carcassonne wearing cloaks, walking down a cobblestone street lined with tall stone buildings and distinctive oval mirrors mounted on wooden posts. The helmeted leader explains that since this region is controlled by the royalists, the group will continue to another friendly city tomorrow on their way to the capital. Luca looks up at the buildings and remarks that the leader was not kidding about the large number of mirrors in the city. He explains that the power of the looking-glass branched warrior makes direct use of these mirrors. In the background, a male guy prepares to send a letter. He holds an envelope up to a mirror and pushes it inside. The leader explains that the power can connect pairs of far-flung mirrors together. The envelope slides directly into the liquid surface of the mirror with a soft splash, creating gateways that cross long distances. Once a connection is activated, the gateway remains open even without the assistance of the looking-glass branched warrior, allowing letters to drop onto a pile on the floor. A top-down view shows citizens walking along the streets as the narrative notes that the city defenses rely on the power of the mirrors. Luca looks at a nearby mirror where a guy points out to his companion that it has turned back into a plain mirror. The other guy mentions that he has seen a lot of this lately. The group moves into a busy market square filled with citizens walking and dancing near the castle towers. A young boy wearing a flower crown approaches Luca to offer him a woven wreath, and Luca takes the flower ring while offering his thanks. The leader explains that they have arrived during the city's midsummer solstice celebration. He adds that local custom dictates that celebrants wear these flower garlands and dance around the streets. Zahid considers this to be lucky timing on their part and asks Oscar for his agreement. Oscar states that they are not here for fun. The squad arrives outside a large timber-framed building. The group enters a large wooden room filled with multiple beds, establishing that they will spend the night at this location. The leader announces that he has a meeting with the head of the city. He instructs the squad to do their best to remain inconspicuous when walking about town by keeping their hoods up or covering their horns with the festive garlands. He explains that the existence of the branched is common knowledge in this land, which is exactly why their presence may attract trouble. Before walking away down the wooden corridor, he instructs Luca to be sure to bring a bodyguard if he chooses to join the festivities. Later, Demi states that she will pass on the invitation because she is not a fan of large crowds. Luca turns to Oscar for assistance, but he, while doing push-ups on the floor, asks if he truly thinks he is going to accompany him. Our boy inquires about the location of Zahid, and Demi reveals that Zahid went straight to the brothel as soon as the leader was out of sight. Luca realizes that his options are limited, looking over at Zoe as she sits quietly on the floor holding her knees. Soon after, they head out into a crowded market street near a tall wooden bonfire tower, where Luca calls out for Zoe to wait as she moves ahead through the crowd. Our boy catches up to Zoe in the crowded street and tells her not to run away like that while she stands near a shop display of hanging mirrors. Zoe points at the hand mirrors on the table and describes them as pretty, which leads Luca to ask if she is talking about the mirrors. Our boy suggests that Zoe buy a mirror for herself since the leader just gave them their stipend, but Zoe explains that her mommy is holding on to her money. Luca then remembers that Zoe has the mind of a 9-year-old child. Luca internally wonders who mommy is and whether Zoe's family lives with her at the manor. Zoe points to a mirror and asks if it is pretty, while Luca stares intently at Zoe, causing her to look down in silence. The merchant tells them to enjoy their purchase as Zoe looks at her reflection in a new hand mirror and offers her thanks, while Luca hands over a coin pouch to pay for it and tells her not to mention it. Luca extends his hand and tells Zoe to hold it so that she does not run off again, and Zoe takes his hand as they move together through the festival crowd. While walking, Zoe looks toward a mirror and watches a reflection of themselves. The two walk down the street toward a food stall where Zoe notes that the food looks yummy and calls it tasty, before they move along to a wall of decorative masks where Zoe remarks that it looks neat. Luca continues to guide Zoe by the hand as they navigate together through the large crowds filling the stone street. A wooden block shatters at a festival game stall, and the game operator loudly praises Zoe for a very good throw while Luca stands nearby and watches the activity. The game operator continues to call out to the crowd, explaining that players receive 10 throws and must hit 7 targets to win a fabulous prize. A child wearing a large wooden mask calls out to Zoe, addressing her directly as a big lady while Luca looks on. The masked child points toward the ground and tells Zoe that she is clearly a grown-up, meaning she is required to throw from behind a specific line on the street. Luca asks what the issue is. The child stands between them and explains that the front line is reserved for children 12 years old and under, while grown-ups must stand further back. Zoe responds that she is not even 12 years old yet, which leaves the masked child completely confused. The masked child begins to say that someone is clearly an adult, but a hand places a pat on the child's head. The father interrupts and tells the child that they had better stand farther back as well. The father looks down at the child and reminds them that they just turned 13 years old. He looks back toward the game stall and apologizes to Luca, explaining that his daughter is a handful. Luca responds that it is not a problem. The father stands with his arms crossed and asks if they are tourists visiting for the festival. Luca replies that they are and asks if he is also there for the event. The father explains that a friend told him this celebration is a lot of fun. The local man explains that during the solstice, the people pray for a plentiful harvest and for the flowering of the branched. He notes that this is because the branched are highly respected in this land. Luca asks what flowering means. The man responds that based on what he has heard, the term is quite literal. He explains that flowers bloom directly on the horns of the branched, marking the next phase of their development. He adds that the garlands distributed to the people represent prayers for this flowering to happen. Our boy wonders silently if the garland branched has already flowered. Nearby, the child runs up to the father to show off a doll, and he tells the child that she is very lucky. The local man holds his child's hand as they walk away together into the crowd, while Luca raises his hand to wave goodbye to them. As they walk together, Zoe asks Luca to play one more time, but Luca responds that he already said no. At the festival, the local man takes off his flower garland and places it onto a large pile at the base of the wooden tower. When night falls, Zoe and Luca stand by the edge of a high stone wall, looking down at the citizens gathered around the illuminated tower. Luca turns his head toward Zoe and asks her to explain the reason why she is working for the pontiff. He asks if the holy leader adopted her the same way he adopted him. Zoe replies that she just does whatever her mommy tells her to do. Zoe explains that the person everyone calls his holiness is her mommy, which leaves Luca completely silent. Luca turns around in surprise and wonders to himself if the pontiff is a woman and if his holiness is actually a mother. He decides that is impossible and Zoe calls out to Luca. Zoe asks Luca if he wants to be a maestro. Luca replies he does. Zoe asks what a maestro does, and Luca responds that there are a few options. Our boy explains that maestros can travel around to play at festivals, join music troupes, or even perform for a royal court during ceremonies. Zoe remarks that it sounds fun. Zoe looks down at Luca and states that she wants to do that too. Luca turns to her in surprise and tells her that she should. Zoe holds onto the edge of the stone wall and explains that there are a lot of things she wants to be when she grows up. She considers the options of becoming a baker, a florist, a toy maker, or an artisan. A wooden torch ignites and burns brightly. Zoe states that she does not know what she will be good at and notes that she cannot make a decision. Luca replies that she has the freedom to be whatever she wants if she sets her mind to it. Luca observes that the bonfire has started as smoke begins to rise from the central tower. Sparks climb into the night sky above the empty lodging room where the rows of beds stand vacant. Zoe rests quietly in her bed while looking closely at her own reflection in the new hand mirror. In a past memory, Mother asks Zoe what she wants to become when she grows up. Young Zoe answers that she does not know but suggests she might want to be like her mother, which causes her mother to express concern. The mother explains to her daughter from the bed that she does not think that is a good choice. She notes that her role as a concubine keeps her confined to the secure stone room except for work and advises her daughter to pick something else, leading young Zoe to ask for other options. The mother lists choices like a baker, a florist, a toy maker, or an artisan, sharing that she wanted to try a different job but could never make a final choice before being brought to the prison cell. In the memory, young Zoe asks if she can be a baker when she gets out of the cell. Her mother replies that she can. Young Zoe asks if she can even be a toy maker, and her mother assures her that she can. The mother then places a hand gently against Zoe's face. She holds Zoe close in the bed and tells her that she can be whatever she wants if she sets her mind to it. The mother promises that she will make sure they get out of the cell. She adds that once they are free, they can travel around so Zoe can try all kinds of things. Later, the mother lies beaten and motionless on the ground as two guards stand in the open doorway. One guard tells her to know her place and warns her never to think about running away again. The guard states that starting the next day, she will serve them instead of the lord of the castle and must teach the child the tricks of the trade. The cell door shuts with a loud slam, and a quiet apology is whispered as young Zoe looks on. The mother lies still on the floor as blood pools around her head, noting that she will never be anything more. She whispers that she will never go anywhere, prompting young Zoe to call out for her mommy. A faint apology sounds as a cracking noise comes from Zoe's head, and she calls out for her mother again while the noise continues near the window. Young Zoe cries out for her mother as she sits on the floor of the cell while loud, continuous cracking sounds fill the entire room. Zoe destroys everything. The stone room is completely destroyed and turned into massive ruins under the full moon, with the bed left resting amidst the shattered pillars. An overhead view shows the bed surrounded by stone debris and blood splatters while young Zoe lies still as her branch grows out. Dead bodies lie covered in blood among the ruined pillars as the tube-headed leader stands nearby, and 17 years pass. Zoe looks at her reflection through a framed window while her mother greets her and wishes her a good morning. The mother stands inside a wooden room holding the large tube and looks down toward Zoe. She asks Zoe to do some work for her while Zoe stands on a battlefield surrounded by soldiers holding spears. Zoe looks on as a hand covered in blood. Zoe stands over the broken armor of defeated soldiers on the open field while inside her mind, the mother asks what she wants to be when she grows up. She remembers Luca telling her that she can be whatever she wants. She remembers Luca saying that she can achieve anything if she sets her mind to it. His words trigger a sudden memory for Zoe, reminding her of when her mother smiled and told her that she could be whatever she wanted. Down in the city square, the large festive bonfire continues to burn brightly into the night sky. Inside the quiet lodging house, Zoe lies down in her wooden bunk bed and goes to sleep under the covers. The next morning, the squad walks in their cloaks along the high stone walls of the fortress. The helmeted leader announces that they are heading to the next city on their way to Limoges and warns the group to be ready for another roadblock from the Looking Glassists. As they walk, Luca mentions to the group that he has been wondering about something, which causes Zoe to look at him. Walking past a row of mirrors on the stone wall, our boy asks what the Looking Glass branched warrior is like and expresses uncertainty about whether she will be willing to assist them. The helmeted leader explains that the actual location of the Looking Glass branched warrior is unknown, making her situation very similar to that of the missing Galleon King. Luca reacts with surprise to the news. The helmeted leader adds that he discovered the previous day that the local faction started the national conflict on their own, rather than acting on the orders of their rulers. The leader explains that 3 years ago, the Looking Glass hero lost her only daughter. He notes that the undefeated warrior became despondent and vanished without a trace, remaining missing ever since. Our boy asks why they are even going to the capital city if the warrior is missing. The leader explains that he has other business there. Zahid mutters that he hates long marches and asks if they could travel straight there by using a large mirror instead. The leader explains that mirrors large enough to transport people become inactive without a continuous infusion of the Looking Glass warrior's power. Zahid reflects on how unfortunate that is as his hand presses into the mirror surface with a plunk sound. Luca asks what other business the leader has in the capital city. The leader responds that he wants to visit the nation's spire and explains his plans for when they arrive, while Zahid's hand is stuck inside the mirror. Luca turns around as Zahid asks for help. He stands trapped by the wall and expresses confusion as his arm remains stuck deep inside the mirror. Demi looks down and warns the group about a threat below them. The stone ground suddenly shatters with a loud noise, causing the entire squad to collapse downward into the breaking floor. Luca realizes in surprise that there is a mirror hidden directly beneath the paving stones. The squad continues to drop through the dark opening along with the falling debris. The leader calls out to Luca and commands him to make for the capital city. After passing through a mirror surface with a plunk sound, the squad lands heavily on a brick floor below with a loud thud. A voice from above greets the entire group as they recover on the floor and look upward to see who is speaking. The tall woman instructs the child standing beside her to say hello. The child greets the group quietly, and the woman states that she believes the squad has come to find her as Luca looks up at her in shock. The woman stands before the large mirrors in the stone ruins and asks if they are looking for her, the looking glass-branched warrior.